You've probably heard of the Whitley Bay Asylum, but do you know the story of the children who vanished there? It's a place that whispers through the wind, and the silence is louder than the screams. Nestled on the edge of a sleepy coastal town, it's a place that's been abandoned for decades, but the locals say it's never truly left. It's like the air itself holds its breath. Stories say that the children who were sent there never came home. Some say they were locked away, others say they were taken by something far darker than the world could understand. And now, decades later, the asylum stands empty, but the echoes of its past still linger. If you dare to step inside, you might just hear the voices of the forgotten children. You ever think about how some places just hold on to the past? Whitley Bay Asylum started in the late 1800s, right in the heart of a quiet little town. They called it a sanatorium back then, but it was more like a prison for the poor and the mad. The founder was a man named Dr. Henry Blackwood, a doctor with a reputation for being a bit harsh. He believed in treating the insane with strict discipline, not kindness. The town supported him, hoping he'd bring order to the chaos of the mind. The asylum was supposed to be a place of healing, but it became a place of suffering. Patients were locked in iron beds, kept in silence, and subjected to treatments that would make your skin crawl today. They called it the dark room where the worst behaved were sent for reform. The staff were mostly men, hired to keep the patients in line. But some of them were women too, working in the kitchen or the infirmary. They were the ones who saw the worst of it and who sometimes spoke of the children who never came home. Some say the asylum was built on a graveyard. Others say the children were taken from the town itself, their parents too poor to care for them. But no one knows for sure. What we do know is that the last patient left in 1947, and the doors have been sealed ever since. So why do you think it's still called Whitley Bay Asylum? Because the name lingers like a whisper, and sometimes whispers have a way of becoming louder. You remember the way the air smelled in those old towns, like dust and old paper and something just a little too quiet. That's how it started in Whitley Bay. No one noticed at first, just a silence that didn't quite fit. The nurses said the children were just tired, but the way they stared at the walls, like they were seeing something we couldn't, made the rest of us uneasy. It was like they were remembering something that wasn't supposed to be remembered. Then the whispers started. Not the kind you hear when you're alone in a room, but the kind that seemed to come from the walls themselves. You could feel them, like the building was breathing with the children. The staff tried to ignore it, but the children began drawing pictures of things they couldn't explain, faces in the windows, hands reaching from the ceiling, and a door that wasn't there. It was like they were trying to tell us something, but in a language we'd forgotten. And then, one by one, the children stopped speaking, not out of fear, but as if they had simply forgotten how. It was the first time we realized something in that place wasn't just wrong, it was remembering. You remember the whispers in the halls, how they always seemed to come from the east wing. That's where the children were taken, and where the silence grew thicker than the walls. One morning, the nurse found the door ajar, the room empty, and the bed sheets still neatly made. No trace of the children, just the smell of lavender and something else, something wrong. There were rumors, of course, that the children had been taken by the head matron, that they were never really there at all. But the truth, if it ever existed, was buried deep in the dust in the dark. The last thing anyone saw was a shadow moving behind the curtain, a flicker of movement that disappeared the moment the light shifted. That's when the silence became a sound of its own. And so the children vanished, their names lost to time, their stories buried in the walls. But the walls remember, and the silence is louder than any scream. I remember the first time I heard about Whitley Bay. It was from an old friend who claimed to have seen a child's doll in the hallway, just sitting there, untouched by time. She said the doll had no eyes, just a blank stare, and when she tried to move it, the air around it seemed to ripple like water. One man swore he saw a child's hand reaching through a barred window, waving slowly, like it was trying to say goodbye. Another told me about a ghostly choir that sang in the night, their voices echoing through the empty halls, a hymn of sorrow and loss. They say the asylum still remembers the children, even after all these years. And some nights, if you listen closely, you can hear them singing still. We followed the whispers of the past, tracing the faded maps and brittle notes left behind by those who had come before. The air grew heavier, like the weight of unspoken secrets pressing down on us. In the old records, names surfaced, children with no last names, no histories, just numbers and dates. It was as if they had never existed, only echoes of their lives trapped in ink and paper. The walls were covered in symbols, some familiar, others twisted into something unknown. It felt like the building itself was speaking, trying to tell us something we weren't ready to hear. And then, we found the final clue, a small, unmarked box tucked beneath the cot. Inside was a child's toy, a wooden doll with a cracked face, and a single, faded photograph of a little girl with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. It was as if the past had reached out, not to scare us but to remind us some stories never die and some voices still wait to be heard. You know, the most haunting thing about Whitley Bay isn't the screams or the cold, it's the silence. The silence that lingers in the halls where the children once played. You ever wonder what they were thinking when the lights went out? The records say the last child left in 1952, but the staff never explained how they got out. No one ever asked. And you know what they say about the things we don't want to remember? They stay with us longer. There's a rumor that the staff kept a secret journal, but no one ever found it. And you know what's stranger? The journal never mentioned the children's names. Just numbers. Just labels. You ever think about the ones who never made it out? The ones who stayed behind? I wonder if they're still waiting for someone to listen to their story. And you know what's really spooky? No one ever found the journal, or the child, or the truth. Just a silence that never fades. You've heard the whispers of the Whitley Bay Asylum, but what about the children? No one remembers their names, but the town still talks about them, little ghosts in the fog, running through the trees, calling for their mothers. Some say the children were never taken, just left behind. Others claim they were hidden into walls, waiting for someone to find them. The truth, it's buried deeper than the asylum's foundations. There's a rumor that on the anniversary of the asylum's closure, the children's laughter can be heard from the hills just before the storm hits. Some say it's the wind, others say it's the dead. But here's the thing, no one has ever found the children. No bodies, no records, just stories passed down like heirlooms. And maybe, just maybe, that's the real ghost, the one that never leaves. You've heard the whispers of the Whitley Bay Asylum, but what about the children who never left? The ones who vanished without a trace, leaving behind only silence and unanswered questions. No bodies were ever found. No clear records of their fates, just names, dates, and the lingering sense that something was terribly wrong. The local historian insists the children were taken by a doctor who vanished in the 1950s, but no one has ever been able to confirm or deny it. To this day, the asylum still sits there, untouched, a silent witness to a tragedy that refuses to be forgotten. And so, the story remains a mystery, waiting for someone to finally step into the shadows and uncover what happened to the children of Whitley Bay. You know, sometimes the quietest places hold the loudest whispers, and sometimes those whispers are from children who never grew up. We don't have to be afraid of the dark. We just have to be willing to listen to what it has to say. And when the wind whispers through the trees, maybe it's not just the wind, it's the children, still waiting for someone to hear them. So, as we turn the page, remember, the past is never truly gone. It just waits for the right moment to return. Now, let's turn the page and see what story the next chapter has for us. You ever heard of a place where the air feels heavy, like it's holding its breath? That's Whitley Bay Asylum, where the walls whisper secrets and the silence screams louder than words. Built in the early 1900s, this place was supposed to be a place of healing until the patients stopped being patients and started being prisoners. Quick word from our sponsor. If this sounds like something you'd enjoy, take a look at the Apple AirPods 2nd generation. There's a link and a QR code on screen right now, and in the description below. Alright, back to it. Now, it's just a shell, a place where the wind seems to carry voices and the trees sway like they're trying to warn you. They say the walls are thick with stories, some of them just don't want to be told. But if you're brave enough to listen, you might hear them. And if you're not careful, you might not leave the same way you came. That's the curse of Whitley Bay, no one ever truly escapes. You know, the Whitley Bay Asylum didn't start as a place of hope. It began as a plan to reform the mad term they used for people who didn't fit into the world. The first building was just a modest stone structure, tucked away from the town, like a secret meant to be forgotten. The man behind it all was Dr. Samuel Wren, a doctor with a reputation for being both brilliant and ruthless. He believed that madness was a disease that could be cured with the right treatment, like taming a wild animal. But not everyone believed in his methods. Some called him a madman himself. He used chains, ice baths, and even electricity to restore sanity. The patients were kept in silence, their screams buried under the weight of his so-called cures. The asylum grew over the years, becoming a sprawling complex of stone and steel, with rooms that smelled of antiseptic and despair. It was a place where the line between healing and harm blurred, and where the true madness began. By the time the asylum closed, it had become a symbol of both medical progress and human cruelty. But the echoes of its dark past remain, lingering in the walls, waiting for someone to listen. You remember how the nurses used to say, "Don't let the windows catch your eye." They weren't just talking about the cold. There was something in the glass, something that watched, that waited, that never let you forget you were being watched. It started with the whispers, not the kind you hear in the dark, but the kind that follow you into the light. You'd be in the hallway, and suddenly you'd hear just a voice, like someone calling your name, but not quite yours. The staff started to leave. Not all of them, but enough that the place felt quieter, like a house that's been emptied of life. Some said they heard things they couldn't explain. Others just said they couldn't sleep anymore. The most unsettling thing was the silence. Not the kind that's peaceful, but the kind that feels like it's waiting. Like the place is holding its breath, like it's holding on to something it doesn't want to let go. And then there were the dreams. Not the kind you remember, but the kind that feel too real. You wake up with the taste of salt in your mouth, and the feeling that you were screaming, even though you didn't remember doing it. You ever wonder what it's like to be trapped in a place that remembers you? That's what happened to Clara Hargrove. She vanished in 1923, right after her mother died in the asylum's basement. The nurses said she was too quiet and too still. They found her clothes folded neatly on a chair, like she just left. But her body was never found. The nurses claimed she'd walked out into the night, but the night in Whitley Bay never truly sleeps. She's been heard whispering in the halls ever since. The doctors called it hysterical amnesia, but Clara's father, a stern man with a pocket watch, never believed it. He said she was taken, not lost, and he swore she was never the same after that night. Now, when the wind howls through the broken windows, some say you can still hear her voice. A soft, trembling whisper calling out from the dark, "Help me!" But no one ever does, not even the ghosts. I met a woman in the 1980s who claimed she saw a pale figure in the hallway of the old Whitley Bay Asylum. She said it was a woman in a nightgown, standing still, like she was waiting for someone. She told me she was alone, and when she tried to run, the figure just smiled and vanished into the shadows. She said it felt like the walls were closing in around her. There was also a man who said he heard voices at night, whispering in a language he didn't understand. He said the voices were pleading, like they were trapped and desperate for help. He said he tried to call the police, but when he did, the voices stopped. He never told anyone, but he said he's been hearing them ever since. Some say the asylum still listens, waiting for the voices to return, and some say it's waiting for the ones who never got to leave. We arrive at the site with a team of historians and local guides, all eager to piece together the asylum's dark past. The silence was heavy, like the weight of unspoken secrets. The first thing we found was a rusted key, half buried in the earth, and it fit a lock in the old gate. It felt like a whisper from the past, trying to tell us something. We found a journal, its pages brittle and yellowed, filled with desperate entries from a nurse who claimed she saw the patients walk through the walls at night. The most unsettling thing was the sound, a faint, rhythmic tapping that seemed to come from nowhere, but followed us wherever we went. It felt like the asylum was still breathing. As we left, the fog rolled in thick and fast, obscuring everything. The asylum seemed to vanish behind the mist, as if it had never been there at all. You know, the one thing that's always bugged me is that no one ever figured out what happened to the last patient to leave Whitley Bay. They just vanished. No records, no body, just a door left ajar and a silence that didn't sound like silence at all. You ever wonder what they were running from? Or maybe what they were running toward? The walls here are thick with history, but this one mystery just keeps whispering in the corners. They say the asylum had a soul, but maybe it just wanted one more story. Maybe it wanted to be remembered not as a place of suffering, but as a place where something was never resolved. And so, the mystery remains. Not because it's unsolvable, but because it's waiting for someone to ask the right question, and maybe, just maybe, to answer it. Some say the asylum's ghosts are just the echoes of lost souls trapped between the world they left and the one they never got to finish. Others whisper that they're still here, waiting for someone to finally listen. There's even a local legend that the asylum's spirit is a child, trapped in a loop of unfinished play, forever chasing the nurse who abandoned them. Then there are those who think the asylum is more than just a place, it's a living thing, a sentient prison that feeds on fear and memory. And some say the real curse isn't the ghosts, but the silence that follows, how the place has swallowed every story, every name, every life, without a sound. There's still no body, no grave, no closure, just whispers in the wind and a silence that feels like it's waiting for something. The local historian says the records were burned. The police say the case was closed, but the families still gather, hoping for a sign. We've followed every lead, checked every file, but sometimes the most haunting thing is the absence of answers. Maybe the real mystery isn't who disappeared. Maybe it's why they never came back, and why the silence still lingers. So here's to the unknown, to the ones who vanished, and the ones who still wait for them. May the wind carry their names. You've been walking the halls of Whitley Bay, but now the silence feels heavier, like the walls are holding their breath. What if the past never truly leaves? What if it just waits, patient as a shadow, for the right moment to step into the light? There's a strange comfort in the unknown, isn't there? A quiet, almost gentle kind of fear that doesn't demand you run. Just sit and listen. And sometimes, the most terrifying stories are the ones that whisper, not scream. But don't worry, there's more where this came from. The next story is waiting, just beyond the veil of the ordinary. And if you're listening, you might just hear it too. So, dear listener, take a deep breath. The next tale is about to begin, and it's not going to be kind. You've heard of the Baskersville legend, but have you ever wondered what it's like to stand where the curse began? Let me take you to the moors of Devon, where the wind whispers secrets and the shadows seem to move on their own. This is where the Baskersvilles once roamed, where the family's dark legacy took root. The air feels heavy, like it's holding its breath, waiting for something to stir. The house itself is long gone, but the land remembers. It's said that the wind carries the sound of a hound's howl, and sometimes, the trees seem to shift just enough to make you question if you're truly alone. Legends say that the curse wasn't just about a hound, it was about the blood, the pride, and the madness that ran through the Baskerville veins. It's a place where the past refuses to stay buried. And now, you're here. But me, listening, feeling the weight of history pressing down on the land. What do you think the Moors are trying to tell us? Now, let's go back to the year 1880, when a man named Henry Baskersville was found dead in his study, his face frozen in a look of terror, as if he'd seen something no man should. Quick word from our sponsor. If this sounds like something you'd enjoy, take a look at the Kindle Paperwhite e-reader. There's a link and a QR code on screen right now, and in the description below. Alright, back to it. The police ruled it a suicide, but the family didn't believe it. They thought Henry had been killed by a monstrous hound, one that had haunted their family for generations. The story of the hound was passed down through the Baskersville family like a dark heirloom, a cautionary tale told in hushed voices around the dinner table. But the truth, as we now know, is far more complex than a ghostly beast. It was a man, a shadow, and a legacy of fear that would echo through the ages. And so, the legend of the Hound of the Baskersvilles was born not just as a tale, but as a warning, a story that would live on in the hearts and minds of those who dared to listen. You remember the way the wind howled through the stones at Baskerville Hall, don't you? It was like a living thing, breathing with the house itself, and that night, it didn't sound like wind at all. The first sign was a whisper, just before the storm broke. A voice, soft as silk, calling from the dark. Not a person, not a dog. Something else entirely, something that had been waiting for the right moment to speak. Then came the scent, not of damp earth or old wood, but something older, something that clung to the air like a memory you couldn't forget. A smell that made the hairs on the back of your neck stand on end. The clock struck midnight, and the house itself seemed to hold its breath. You could feel it, something ancient, something watching, something that had waited for years to be remembered. And then, just as the silence stretched too far, the first sound came. Not from the house, not from the wind, but from inside you. A low, guttural growl, like the echo of a dog's bark, but not one you had ever heard before. You remember the fog that clung to the moor like a shroud, and the way the wind would howl through the Baskersville's estate as though it were whispering secrets. But what really chilled the blood was the night the hound vanished. The last time the hound was seen, it stood at the edge of the moor, its eyes glowing like lanterns in the dark. The family gathered, hoping for a miracle, but the hound never came back. It just disappeared. Some say the hound was never real, that it was a trick of the mind, a shadow cast by the fear of the past. But others say the hound was real, and that it was never meant to return. And so the moor remained, untouched, unbroken. The hound never returned, but the legend did. And the moor, it seems, still waits for the next soul to wander too close. I've heard from a few folks who swear they saw the hound in the moor, not just in the fog, but in the daylight. They say it's not a dog, it's something older, something that watches. One woman told me she saw it pacing the edge of a stream, its breath coming in slow, wet clouds. She said it looked like a beast from a dream, not a creature of this world. Another claimed it followed her home, not in the dark, but in the morning. She said it was too large for a dog, too fast for a man, and it had no shadow. They all say it's not a dog, not a man, not even a ghost. They say it's something that remembers, something that waits. And it's always watching the Baskersville family. I've asked them all if they want to talk about it. Some say they don't. Some say they can't. But they all agree on one thing, the hound doesn't forget. We followed the trail of the Baskersville hound through the moor, where the wind whispered secrets and the stones seemed to hold their breath. I found myself wondering if the hound was real or just a shadow of fear. In a forgotten cottage, we found a diary, yellowed and brittle, filled with frantic scribbles about the hound's eyes black as pitch and full of hate. It felt like the ghost of a man's fear was still there, waiting. we uncovered a hidden chamber beneath the manor, its walls lined with old paintings of the Baskervilles, their faces twisted in anguish. It felt like we were walking through a history that didn't want to be remembered. The hound, it seems, was never just a beast. It was a mirror of the family's darkest fears, a symbol of the guilt that refused to die, and we were standing in its path. You ever notice how some stories just stop? Like the world forgets to breathe. That's what happened with the Baskerville hound. One moment, it's bounding through the moor, the next nothing. No body, no tracks, no witnesses, just a scream echoing from the heath, and the wind carrying the scent of something old and wrong. You think about it, don't you? That one detail that just doesn't fit. Like the hound wasn't a beast at all. Like it was something else. Something waiting. That's the thing about the Baskervilles. You never quite know if the hound was real, or if it was just a story told too many times and believed too deeply. And that's why it still haunts us. Not because it's real, but because we never stopped believing. You've heard the tale of the Baskerville hound, but what about the men who vanished before it ever howled? Local legends say the hound was just the final whisper of something far older, a curse that began with a man's greed and ended with a family's ruin. Some say the hound was summoned by the Baskervilles themselves, a family that dined on secret and died by the dozens. Others claim it was the ghost of a man who was never meant to be buried, his body never found, his spirit never at peace. Some say the hound still roams the moors, but not for the Baskervilles. It's said to follow those who seek the truth, those who dig too deep into the past. And when it finally catches them, it doesn't howl, it whispers. So when you hear the hound's cry, don't run. Some say it's a warning. Some say it's a welcome. But if you're lucky, it might just let you go and leave you with a story worth telling. You know, sometimes the scariest stories aren't the ones that end. They're the ones that fade into silence, leaving only questions behind. And this one, it's still whispering in the dark. The Baskerville family vanished, but the house? It stayed, and it's been watching. Some say the moor itself is alive, hungry for more secrets. Others say it's just waiting for someone to listen. There are no bodies, no graves, no closure. Just a house that doesn't forget, and a name that echoes like a ghost in the wind. Do you think it's ever going to stop? We can't solve it all. Some mysteries just linger, like the scent of a long-dead fire. And sometimes, the best way to honor them is to let them haunt us a little. So if you ever find yourself walking the moor on a cloudy night, remember, the past isn't gone. It's just waiting for you to hear it. You ever notice how the best stories are the ones that linger? Like a faint whisper in the dark, they creep into your dreams and leave you wondering if you dreamed it or it dreamed you. And sometimes, the most haunting ones are the quietest. A silence so thick, it feels like it's been waiting for you to listen. And now, dear listener, let's step into the next tale. But first, take a moment to breathe, to feel the weight of the moment, and to let the silence settle around you. After all, the best stories are the ones that make you feel a little bit more alive and a little bit more afraid. You heard of haunted churches, but Blithburgh Church. That's a place where the silence screams. Nestled in the heart of Suffolk, it's as if the stones themselves remember the past. Legend says the ghost of a 13th century monk haunts the nave, his footsteps echoing through the empty pews. But the real mystery is why he was there in the first place. Some say the church was built on an ancient burial ground, and the spirits of the dead refused to be buried. Others believe the monks who lived there were cursed by a vengeful spirit from a nearby forest. What we do know is that the church has been the subject of countless local tales, each one more haunting than the last. Some say the ghosts are not just of the past, but of the present. And yet, despite the whispers and the warnings, people still come to Blithburgh to find solace, to seek answers, or simply to feel the weight of history pressing down on them. So, what do you think? Is the church truly haunted, or is it just the stories that linger long after the last bell has rung? You know, the story of Blithburgh Church begins not with ghosts, but with a man named William de Blyth. He was a Norman noble who built this church in the 12th century, right after the conquest. It was his way of showing off his power, and also, of course, to honor his family. William wasn't just a builder, he was a man of great ambition and, let's be honest, some questionable ethics. He had a wife, a son, and a secret. You see, he had a lover in the village, and that lover was none other than his own daughter, Eleanor. You remember the first time you noticed the wind wasn't quite right. It was a Sunday morning, and the church bells were ringing, but the air felt heavy, like the weight of 1,000 unspoken prayers. The priest, Father O'Connor, looked up from his reading and frowned. He said nothing, just tilted his head as if listening to something just beyond the sound of his own voice. The next morning, the first row of pews was covered in a thin layer of frost, even though the sun was out. It looked like a hand had brushed across the wood, leaving only a ghost of its touch. Quick word from our sponsor. If this sounds like something you'd enjoy, take a look at the Stanley Quencher 40 Oz tumbler. There's a link and a QR code on screen right now, and in the description below. Alright, back to it. Then came the whispers. Not loud, not clear, but just enough to make you turn your head, just enough to make you wonder if you were the only one who heard them. And that's when you started to wonder if the silence was the loudest sound of all. You know, sometimes the most chilling stories aren't about what happened, but what never did. Like the Sunday when the bell didn't ring at all, and the priest never came to Mass. The parishioners waited and waited, their faces etched with worry. No one knew where the priest had gone. Some said he'd been taken by the same dark force that haunts these stones. They searched the village, the woods, even the nearby river, but the priest vanished without a trace, leaving only a single white rose on the altar, pressed between the pages of a prayer book. To this day, some say the bell still rings at midnight, but no one has ever heard it, and no one has ever seen the priest again. Just a rose and silence. I've spoken to several locals who say they've seen a figure in the church at dusk, standing by the altar, dressed in 19th century lace. They describe it as a woman, but they can't tell if she's real or a shadow in the candlelight. One woman, who used to volunteer here, claims she heard a voice calling her name from the choir loft. She climbed up, found nothing but a broken hymn book, and now she says the voice follows her in her dreams. A teenager once claimed he saw a group of people sitting in the pews, but when he approached, they vanished like smoke. He said they were dressed in old-fashioned clothes and looking right at him, as if they knew he was there. The most unsettling account comes from a retired priest who used to serve here. He says he heard the voice of a child crying in the nave, and when he followed it, he found a little girl's doll lying on the floor untouched by time. These stories don't just linger in the air, they live in the bones of this place, waiting for someone to listen. And sometimes they answer back. We started with the old parish records, those brittle pages whispering secrets through time. What did they say? That the bell tower was built over an ancient burial ground. Then came the local historian, a gruff man with a pipe and a voice like gravel. He told us about the singing stones, a legend that the church's foundations hum when the wind is right. The investigators brought in geophysics equipment, and what they found was unexpected: a series of shallow graves just beneath the nave, untouched by time or soil. But the real chill came when they found the 18th century ledger, its pages filled with names, some familiar, some unknown, each marked with a single word: disappeared. And then there were the voices, faint, overlapping, just on the edge of hearing. The investigators swore they could hear them, but they couldn't place where they were coming from. So now we ask you, dear listener, what do you think happened here? Did the church swallow its own history, or is it still waiting to tell its story? You've heard the tales of the Blitzberg Church, but there's one thing that's never made sense. A single detail, buried in the archives, that no one seems to care to ask about. It's not the ghost, not the whispers in the stone, not the missing bell. It's something quieter, something that doesn't fit with the rest of the story. It's like the church has a secret it's never told, and the world has forgotten to ask the right question. So, what if the real horror isn't the ghost, but the silence around that one unexplained detail? You've heard the stories, but some locals swear the whispers in the pews aren't just wine. They say the church has a memory, and it's not always kind. Some say the ghost of a 19th century vicar still lingers, his voice echoing through the stone like a hymn that never ends. Others believe it's the spirit of a lost child, still searching for home. There's even a theory that the church itself is cursed by the blood of those who built it, a dark pact sealed in the 12th century. The stones remember, and they don't forget. Still, some say the real mystery is why the church was abandoned for decades. Was it fear, or something more sinister? The locals will only tell you if you promise not to ask too many questions. And if you dare to step inside when no one's around, you might hear it just a whisper, like a voice calling your name from the past. But be careful, dear listener. Some echoes don't want to be found, and to this day, no one knows for sure what happened to the little girl in the church. Was it a ghost, or just a child's imagination run wild? You've heard the stories, but have you ever wondered if the echoes are still waiting for someone to listen? The local historian, Mr. Whitmore, says there's no record of any child ever being lost in Blitzberg, but the villagers still talk about it like it's a secret they've all agreed to keep. Have you ever noticed how some places just refuse to let go of their past? The church itself has been rebuilt and restored, but the mystery remains. It's like the walls are still whispering, waiting for someone to ask the right question. And sometimes, the answer is louder than you think. So, what do you think? Was it a child, a ghost, or just the church trying to tell us something? The echoes are still here, and they've been waiting for someone to listen. And maybe, if you're lucky, they'll finally speak. You know, sometimes the most haunting things aren't the screams or the shadows, but the silence that follows. A moment where the air feels too still, like the world has forgotten to breathe. It's in those silences that the echoes lie soft, lingering, and just out of reach. Like the church bells, but not quite. Like a memory that refuses to fade. And so, as we leave the Blithburg Church behind, I leave you with this. What if the truest ghosts are the ones we never hear at all? The ones that whisper only in the spaces between the stories. Until next time, dear listeners, keep your ears open, your hearts light, and your doors unlocked. For sometimes, the most dangerous thing is not the ghost, but the silence that follows. You've heard of haunted castles, but Castle Comet? It's a place that whispers secrets through its stone. Nestled in the rolling hills of England, it's more village than fortress, but the walls have a story that won't let go. The locals say the walls don't just echo, they wail. It's a sound that slips through the cracks like a child's cry or a woman's lament, depending on who you ask. Some say it's the wind, others say it's something else entirely. There's a legend, passed down like a family heirloom, of a woman who vanished in the 1800s. Her name is lost to time, but the walls remember. They remember her laughter, her footsteps, and the night she disappeared without a sound. The wails begin at dusk, when the village empties and the silence becomes too loud. Some say they hear it from their windows, others say it comes from the stones themselves, as if the castle is trying to speak. Now, you might think it's just a story, but the same whispers have been reported for over 2 centuries. And if you're ever in the area, listen closely. You might just hear it too. You see that stone wall there, just past the chapel? That's where it all started. A young couple, betrothed by their families, decided to elope. They were caught, dragged back, and the man was hanged right there, in front of his bride. The bride, heartbroken, refused to leave the village. She took up residence in the old mill, living with her mother. She would wail at night, calling for her lost love. The villagers said her voice echoed through the stone like a ghost trying to get out. The legend says she's still there, trapped between the world of the living and the dead. Some say she's cursed, others say she's just waiting for the day her love will find his way back to her. And that's how the walls began to wail. It was a love story, twisted by fate, and now it's a legend that haunts the very stones of Castle Comet. You know how sometimes the wind just whispers? Well, in Castle Comet, it didn't whisper. It screamed, and it did it in a way that made the trees bend and the stones shiver. The locals said it was the wind, of course, but the wind doesn't weep, and it doesn't leave a trail of muddy footprints in the grass, like someone had been running through the night. Then came the smell like damp earth and something sweet and wrong. It clung to your clothes, your skin, and it made your heart race in a way that wasn't just fear. The villagers called it the Lady of the Hollows. Some said she was a widow who died in the war. Others said she was a witch who cursed the land. But none of them ever saw her, just heard her. And then, one morning, the walls started to cry. Not in words, but in sound low, mournful, like a child's lullaby gone wrong. It wasn't the wind anymore. It was something else. You know, the real horror isn't always in the ghosts, it's in the silence. One night, the village elders said they heard a child's voice, not from the walls, but from the forest beyond them. It was a boy, no older than 10, asking for his mother. Quick word from our sponsor. If this sounds like something you'd enjoy, take a look at the Fire TV Stick 4K streaming device. There's a link and a QR code on screen right now, and in the description below. Alright, back to it. They sent a search party, but when they arrived, the boy was gone. No footprints, no trace. Just the sound of his voice, echoing through the trees like a cruel trick, and then the silence returned. The villagers never spoke of it again, but every year on the boy's birthday, the wind would howl through the trees, and the walls of Castle Comet would whisper his name like a lullaby, but with teeth. And so, the walls still wail, not for the boy, but for the silence that followed, for the love that vanished, for the truth that was never found, and for the ones who still wait, in the dark, for someone to listen. I once met a woman from London who swore she heard the walls of Castle Comet whisper her name in the dead of night. She said it was like a lullaby, but with a twist of sorrow. She described the sound as soft, almost like a child's voice, but with a tone of longing. She said it followed her home, and she couldn't explain why she kept returning. They said it looked like a woman, but the eyes were too deep, too knowing. Some say it's the ghost of a noble woman who died in the castle's tower, never found. No one has seen it since, but the stories keep coming. Some say the walls are still trying to tell her story, waiting for someone to listen. We began with the local historian, a wiry old man who claimed to have walked those walls for 50 years. He said the wails started after the last war, when the castle was abandoned. You can hear them at dusk, he said, like a ghost trying to call for help. The team brought in thermal imaging and audio recorders, but the walls remained stubbornly silent. Then, one night, the equipment picked up a faint, rhythmic vibration like a heartbeat, but slower. We couldn't tell if it was the wind or something else. One of the portraits, a woman in a Victorian gown, seemed to follow us with her gaze. We snapped a photo, but when we developed it, the image was blurred, as if the camera had caught something moving just beyond the frame. The final clue came from the local church. A priest whispered that the castle was once home to a noble family who vanished in the 1800s. They were accused of witchcraft, he said, but no one ever proved it. And the walls remember. We left the castle with more questions than answers. The walls still whisper, but now we know they're not just telling stories, they're telling us something we might not be ready to hear. You've heard the whispers, you've seen the flicker of light in the old windows, but there's one thing that still haunts me: why the walls don't just whisper, they weep. No one can say for sure what caused the tears, but they've been there since the 1700s, dripping down like a silent, sorrowful confession. Some say it's the ghost of a child, others believe it's the spirit of a wronged wife, but no one has ever seen the source of the tears, only the droplets themselves. And that's the thing, no one ever found the origin of those tears. Just the sound, just the sight, just the mystery. So what do you think? Was it a curse? A punishment? Or just the memory of someone who never got to say goodbye? They say the walls don't just echo, they scream asterisk. The old villagers still whisper that the castle stones are alive, remembering every secret that was buried in them. Some believe it's the spirit of a long-dead mistress trapped by her own jealous lover. Others claim it's the cry of a child who never made it out of the keep. One local insists the wails are the castle itself, a living thing that remembers the pain of its own construction. They say the stones were built on a burial ground, and the dead still call out for their names. No one knows for sure, but as long as the walls keep crying, the story of Castle Camel will never be finished. It just gets quieter and more lonely every year. And so, we return to the walls, to the mystery that refuses to be silenced. No one knows exactly what happened that night, but the silence is louder than the truth. Some say the cries came from the walls themselves, others whisper that they were voices from the past, trapped and pleading to be heard. Some believe the tale is a cautionary fable, a warning against trespassing in places where the past refuses to let go. And still, the walls wail. Every storm, every night, the sound echoes through the valley like a child's cry in the dark. So, what do you think? Was it a cry for help, or a cry from the grave? I'll leave you with that, and the walls still whispering. You've heard the echoes of Castle Khmer, but have you ever wondered what the walls whisper to the moon? Maybe they're just telling stories, or maybe they're waiting for someone to listen. There's a silence here that feels older than time, like the earth itself is holding its breath. It's not the absence of sound, it's the presence of something unseen. Sometimes the quietest places hold the loudest secrets, and sometimes those secrets aren't meant to be uncovered, only remembered. So, as we turn the page, I leave you with a question. What if the walls are not just remembering the past, but trying to warn us of the future? Stay warm, stay curious, and never stop listening for the stories that only the silence can tell. You've heard of the Whitley Bay Asylum, haven't you? A place where the walls seem to remember the screams that once echoed through them. It's not just a building, it's a story waiting to be told. Built in the early 1900s, it was meant to be a haven for the mentally ill. But for many, it became a prison of suffering where hope was replaced with silence and fear took root in every corner. The stories of Whitley Bay are as haunting as the place itself. Whispers of ghostly figures wandering the halls, of voices calling out from the empty rooms, and of a place where the past refuses to stay buried. Even today, the locals speak of it in hushed tones. Some say the asylum is still alive, its history lingering in the air like a half-remembered dream. Others say it's just a place where the echoes of the lost still walk. So, what is it about Whitley Bay that continues to haunt us? Is it the silence that follows, or the voices that still call out from the shadows? Let's take a step deeper into the mystery. You know, the Whitley Bay Asylum didn't start as a place of terror, it began as a promise of healing. Built in the early 1900s, it was meant to be a beacon of hope for the mentally ill, not a prison of despair. The first patients were treated with a mix of compassion and the latest medical practices of the time: electric shocks, ice baths, and even moral therapy. It was a time of progress, and the world believed in progress. The staff, too, became part of the story. Some were kind, others were desperate, and in the silence of the wards, the whispers began. The patients started to speak in voices that no one could hear. The true horror began when the asylum was abandoned. The buildings fell into disrepair, and the silence became deafening. The echoes of the past refused to fade, waiting for someone to listen. Today, the place is a ruin, but the stories still live on. Some say the walls are still whispering, and the ghosts of those who were lost are still waiting for their voices to be heard. You remember how things changed, don't you? The first time you noticed the lights flickered just as the nurses called out for help, like the building itself had a heartbeat. Then came the whispers in the halls, not from the patients but from the walls. A soft, feminine voice just out of reach, calling your name in the middle of the night. Then the patients began to vanish, one by one. No one knew where they went, but the nurses said they were taken to the deep rooms, a place no one was ever allowed to see. And finally, the walls started to bleed, not in the way you think, but in a way that made the nurses scream and the doctors turn pale. It wasn't blood, it was something else entirely. You could feel it, couldn't you? The weight of the place pressing down on your chest, like the air itself was holding its breath. That was when you knew something was terribly wrong. You remember the rumors, don't you? That the Whitley Bay Asylum was more than a place for the sick, it was a prison for the desperate. And then one night, something changed. It was the night of the fire. Or maybe it was the night the fire started. No one knows for sure. But the staff vanished and the patients were never seen again. Just silence and smoke. One girl, no older than 12, was last seen running through the halls, screaming. Her name was Alice. Some say she was the last to leave. Others say she was never there at all. They found her journal later, hidden beneath a floorboard. It was full of drawings and words that didn't make sense. They took me, she wrote. They took me and they won't let me go. To this day, the asylum is abandoned. But if you listen closely, you can hear her voice soft, scared, and never letting go. I've spoken with several locals who say they've seen a pale figure wandering the grounds at dusk. One man claims he saw a woman in a white dress, her face hidden behind a veil of mist, walking the same path the asylum's patients once took. Quick word from our sponsor. If this sounds like something to enjoy, take a look at the Amazon Echo Dub Dift smart speaker. There's a link and a QR code on screen right now, and in the description below. Alright, back to it. Another witness, a retired nurse, says she heard the sound of a child's laughter echoing through the empty corridors long after the asylum was abandoned. She insists it was no trick of the wind. Some say the asylum is haunted by the voices of the patients, trapped in the walls, whispering secrets they were never meant to know. Others believe the ghosts are still searching for closure. It's said that if you listen closely, you can still hear the cries of the lost and the sorrow of the forgotten. The asylum is not just a place, it's a memory, a wound, and a warning. We began by tracing the asylum's original blueprints, and what we found was more than just walls and corridors, it was a labyrinth of suffering. The layout was designed to isolate the patients, to trap them in a place where escape was impossible, and the silence was louder than the screams. The records were sparse, but the entries about the patients spoke of a kind of slow, methodical torment. Some were locked in their rooms for weeks. Others were given nothing but silence and the sound of dripping water. The staff called it the quiet cure. One of the most disturbing findings was the list of patients who vanished without a trace. No records of their departure, no signs of struggle, just empty beds and the faint scent of lavender, a perfume the staff used to calm the most agitated souls. The more we dug, the more we realized the asylum wasn't just a place of confinement, it was a place of ritual. The staff kept journals, and in them, they wrote of the silent hour, a time when the patients were taken to a secret room and left alone. No one knew what happened there, but the silence after was louder than any explanation. And then we found the final piece of the puzzle, a map of the asylum with a single mark, a red circle over a spot that wasn't on any official blueprint. It was as if the place itself had been altered, or perhaps something had been hidden beneath the floorboards, something that never left. It wasn't just the patients who were trapped in Whitley Bay. The asylum itself had a way of holding onto its secrets, and we were only just beginning to understand how deep the silence ran. You know, there's one thing that's always left us scratching our heads. What exactly was the thing that made the Whitley Bay Asylum so different? You ever think about that? The way the patients just vanished. No one ever saw the patients go missing. Not a single person, not even the staff. Just gone, like they'd been erased from the world. You ever wonder if they were taken, or if they just walked away one day? The last thing the asylum ever held was a mystery, not just of death, but of disappearance. And that's the one thing that's never been explained. You ever wonder if the patients were never really lost at all? So, what do you think? Was it the patients who disappeared, or the asylum that took them? Or maybe something else entirely? Something that never wanted to be found? Some say the whispers you hear in the wind are not the wind at all, but the ghosts of patients who once cried out for help and never got it. The locals still believe the asylum's old grounds are haunted by the souls of those who were never meant to be there. Some say she is the spirit of a patient who tried to escape but was never found, and now she walks the halls to find her way back. Others insist she is the nurse who tried to save them all, but was too late, and now she walks the halls in search of the ones she couldn't save. And some say she's not a ghost at all, but the memory of a place that never let anyone go, and now it's still holding on. And still, to this day, the mystery lingers. No bodies found, no closure, just whispers in the dark. Did they vanish, or did they stay? The files were sealed for decades, and now they're locked away again, like a secret too painful to face. Who decides what we remember? We search for answers, but the truth seems to slip through our fingers like sand. Is it time we stopped looking and started listening? The place still watches, still waits. Maybe it's not the ghosts we should be fearing, but the silence that follows. And so, we leave with more questions than answers, but with a story that lingers in the quiet spaces between the lines. You know, sometimes the ghosts aren't the ones who scream. Sometimes it's the silence that haunts the most. The Whitley Bay Asylum didn't just vanish. It left behind a whisper, a question, and a door that never quite closes. And maybe that's the real tragedy. Not the pain they suffered, but the silence that followed. The silence that never let them go. So next time you pass by a place that feels just a little too still, maybe you'll remember some places never really let go. And now, as we wrap this tale, I'm curious, have you ever felt a place whisper your name, just once? Well, stay warm, my friends. And don't forget to look behind you sometimes. The past is just a little closer than you think. You've heard of places that hum with secrets, but the Thompson House? That's a place that whispers. A Victorian mansion, all dark wood and heavy drapes, perched on the edge of a forgotten town where the fog clings like a ghost. The locals say the house was built by a man who thought he could outsmart the devil. But the devil, it seems, had other plans. Now the house sits empty, its silence louder than any noise. Some say the Thompson family's last days were filled with madness and murder. Others claim the house is just waiting for someone to come in and hear what it's been trying to say all these years. You might think a place like this would be abandoned for good, but the Thompson house, it's still standing, and it's still waiting. For what? Maybe you'll find out. You know, the Thompson house didn't start as a spooky place. It was built in the 1850s by a wealthy businessman named Silas Thompson, who had a penchant for grandeur and a terrible temper. He filled the house with marble, velvet, and a grand piano, but his wife, Eleanor, wasn't impressed. She preferred quiet and calm, not the chaos of a man who believed he could control everything. Mr. Lockwood was said to have a fondness for the house's secret cellar, where Silas kept his most valuable possessions and his darkest secrets. It was there that the first whispers of something unnatural began. Eleanor eventually returned, and the house was never the same. Silas died under mysterious circumstances, and Mr. Lockwood vanished, leaving behind only the echoes of his laughter and the scent of something cold and lingering. Now, when the wind howls through the trees and the ice clinks against the windows, the house seems to whisper secrets that no one has yet dared to listen to. You remember the first time you noticed the cold? Not the kind that comes with the late autumn night, but a chill that lingers, like the air had been holding its breath for years. The temperature dropped just enough to make you question if the thermostat had been tampered with, but no one was home. Not even the cats, who usually curl up by the fire. Then came the whispers. Not loud, not even clear, but a murmur just beyond the edge of hearing, like the house itself was trying to tell you something. You tried to convince yourself it was just the wind or the old pipes groaning, but the house had a way of making you feel like it was listening, waiting for you to listen back. And then the first real sign, a scent. Not of smoke or decay, but something older, something that made your skin prickle like you'd stepped into a memory you never lived. You've heard the whispers in the woods, felt the cold in the air, but nothing prepares you for what happened inside the Thompson house. The night they vanished, the silence was louder than the screams. The family was gone by morning, their things left just as they were. No struggle, no sign of a fight, just the sound of a door slamming and the scent of something sweet and wrong lingering in the air. The last person to see them was the mailman. He said he saw a light flickering inside, and the windows were all dark. But when he got closer, the light vanished, and the house seemed to hold its breath. No bodies were found, no footprints, just a trail of cold spots and the faint sound of a child's voice, whispering, "Come play with me." To this day, the Thompson house still hums with the echo of that night, and if you listen closely, you can almost hear the laughter, waiting for the next soul to wander too close. I've spoken to several people who swear they've seen the Thompson house from the hill, and they all say the same thing: it's not just a house. It's a presence, a weight, like the air itself has thickened. One woman told me she saw a light flicker from the second floor, just before a storm rolled in. She said it was the color of wet ash, like something was trying to signal her from the inside. Some claimed to have seen the porch light go on in the middle of the night, only to find the house dark when they arrived. Others say they heard a voice calling their name from the windows, but when they looked, there was nothing but glass. Quick word from our sponsor. If this sounds like something you'd enjoy, take a look at the Stanley Quencher 40 Oz tumbler. There's a link and a QR code on screen right now, and in the description below. Alright, back to it. There's a pattern, you see. The same eerie lights, the same unexplained sounds, the same sense that someone is watching, not from the outside, but from within. Wait in. We started with the basics, checking the locks, the wiring, the old photographs. But the more we looked, the more the house seemed to watch us back. The walls were lined with yellowed newspapers from the 1930s, and every article mentioned the same thing: the Thompson family vanished without a trace, leaving behind only a locked door and a silence that never faded. Then there were the sounds. A whisper in the hallway, a creak in the floorboards, a child's laughter echoing through the empty rooms, each one louder than the last, as if the house itself was trying to tell us something. We found a diary in the basement, written in a shaky hand, filled with frantic entries about a presence that grew stronger each night. The last page was torn out, leaving us with more questions than answers. And then there was the scent, a faint, lingering perfume, vanilla and lavender wafting from the upstairs bedroom, though no one had ever lived there since the 1930s. The one thing that has never been explained is the sound of the piano. It wasn't played in decades, but it still plays itself, soft and slow, like a ghost trying to remember a tune. No one can hear it when they're awake, but the caretakers say the sound lingers in the morning, like a whisper from the past trying to be heard. It's not just the sound, it's the way it stops. The melody fades like a memory, and then silence. No one ever knows what the piano is trying to say. That's the one thing that's never been explained. The piano, the melody, the silence after, and the feeling that someone, somewhere, is still trying to play it. You've heard the stories, but what do the locals actually believe? Some say the Thompson house is cursed by a vengeful spirit. Others insist it's just the echo of a family's final scream. What do you think the house is trying to tell us? One local legend claims the house was built on an old Indian burial ground, and the spirits still walk the halls at midnight. But others say it's just the wind howling through the trees, or the sound of a child playing hide and seek. There's even a theory that the house was once a secret meeting place for a cult, and the whispers you hear are the remnants of their ancient rituals. But then again, maybe it's just the sound of the earth shifting beneath the foundation. So what do you believe? Is the Thompson house a place of tragedy or a place of mystery? Or maybe it's just a house like any other with a story that's still waiting to be told. You've heard the whispers, but the truth, it's still locked in the walls of that old house, waiting for someone to listen. No one's ever found the body, but the police say it's not for lack of trying. They found the boots, but not the body. The boots were still there, muddy and worn, like they'd been left behind in the snow. Some say they were hers, others say they were just a trick of the light. The locals still talk about it, though. You can hear it in their voices, the way they mention the Thompson house in hushed tones. Some say the ghost still walks those frozen paths, searching for something or someone. And so the house sits, quiet and cold, with a story that refuses to die. It's not just a place, it's a question, echoing through the years like the sound of a distant wind in the trees. You can feel it, can't you? That hush, that moment between the end of one story and the beginning of another. Like the house itself is holding its breath. Sometimes, the most haunting thing is not the ghost but the silence that follows its last whisper. So I'll leave you with this: the Thompson house doesn't want to be remembered. It wants to be felt. But remember, dear listener, the stories don't end here. They just wait for the right night and the right heart. You've heard of the Priory of Sion, haven't you? A place where whispers of ancient secrets and dark legacies have lingered for centuries. It's not just a ruin, it's a tomb of mystery. Nestled in the hills of France, it was once a beacon of knowledge and power. But beneath its grandeur, something darker stirred, a legacy that refused to stay buried. People say the air here is thick with the weight of history. Some claim they've heard voices in the wind, or felt a chill that lingers long after they've left. But what really happened here? Why does the legacy of the Priory of Sion still haunt the land and those who dare to seek the truth? You ever wonder how a place like the Priory of Sion got its start? It began in the 12th century when a group of knights, disillusioned with the church, carved out a quiet corner of France to live their own kind of faith. These knights weren't just warriors, they were scholars, mystics, and protectors of hidden knowledge. They called themselves the Order of the Holy Grail, and they believed the bloodline of Jesus had survived through the ages. The knights were loyal, but they were also human. And as time passed, some of them turned on others, betraying their own to protect their secrets. The priory's fate was sealed not by war, but by the weight of its own mystery. By the time the last knight died, the priory had become more myth than memory. But its legacy lived on not in stone or sword, but in whispers, in bloodlines, and in the stories we still tell. You remember the way the leaves clung to the ground, brittle and yellow, like the last gasp of autumn. It was the first time the wind whispered through the trees in a voice that didn't belong to the wind. The stones at the edge of the priory grounds had begun to shift, not in the way of the earth, but in the way of something conscious, something watching, something waiting. The old caretaker, a quiet man with a face like weathered parchment, said the stones had always been there, but now they seemed to hum with a low, resonant sound like a distant bell in a dream. And then, the first night, the wind stopped altogether, and the silence that followed was not the silence of peace, but the silence of something holding its breath. You can almost hear the stones whispering, though you know, of course, that stones don't whisper. But sometimes, you wonder if the stones are just listening. You remember the letter, don't you? The one that arrived with no return address, sealed in red wax, and the words that made your heart stop. The secret has been waiting for you. It wasn't just the words, it was the weight of it, as if the envelope itself had been carried through centuries, holding a secret too dangerous to be spoken aloud. They say the Priory guards its secrets with more than just locks and chains. Some believe the silence you heard after the letter vanished was not silence at all, it was a whisper, carried on the wind, beckoning you closer. And then, the last letter, found months later, written in the same hand, but with a different message. The secret is not what you think. The truth is buried where the light cannot reach. The final clue led to a place no one expected, a forgotten chapel, hidden behind a locked door, where the air felt heavier and the silence was absolute except for the sound of something moving in the dark. I met a woman who claimed she saw a figure in the cloister at dusk, its face hidden behind a veil of ivy. She said it moved like smoke, and when she tried to follow, it vanished into the shadows. Another told me of a cold spot in the chapel where the air would still and the candles would flicker in unison, as if something was breathing with them. A young man, once a monk, described hearing a voice in the library at night, low, almost whispering, asking for something he'd never find. And then there was the nun who swore she saw her own reflection in the stained glass windows, but when she turned, the glass was empty. Each story, though different, carries the same weight and echo of something ancient, waiting to be heard. We began with the old records, and what we found was more than we expected. The Priory of Sion wasn't just a relic of the past, it was a breeding ground for secrets. Every entry seemed to hint at something hidden, something that wasn't meant to be known. The monks who lived there were more than just scholars, they were protectors of something ancient. Then there were the accounts of those who disappeared, no bodies, no explanations. Some claimed to hear whispers in the night, others spoke of a cold that never left the halls. We found no proof, but we found enough to make us wonder. The Priory wasn't just haunted, it was being watched, and it had been for centuries. You know, the most haunting thing about the Priory of Sion isn't the ghosts or the secrets, it's the one thing that just doesn't fit. No one can explain it, and it's the only detail that keeps the whole thing from being solved. It's not the location, not the symbols, not even the supposed hidden code. It's something far simpler and far more unsettling. A single word that appears in every account, yet never once is it explained. Why crimson? What does it mean? Some say it refers to a secret society, others a color of blood or a forbidden manuscript. But no one can say for sure, and that's what makes it feel like a whisper from the past, waiting to be heard. Quick word from our sponsor. If this sounds like something you'd enjoy, take a look at the Kindle Paperwhite e-reader. There's a link and a QR code on screen right now, and in the description below. Alright, back to it. It's like the Priory itself is holding its breath, waiting for someone to finally ask the question no one dares to say out loud. And maybe, just maybe, that's why it's still standing waiting for the answer. You've heard the stories, but have you ever stopped to ask why the Priory of Sion still haunts the minds of locals? Some say it's the echoes of forbidden knowledge. Others whisper it's the curse of a woman betrayed by her own blood. There's a rumor that the last priest who lived there was found dead in the chapel, his hands stained with ink and his eyes full of something that wasn't quite fear. Some say the symbol is a warning, a mark left by the last guardian of the Priory's secrets. Others say it's a curse, a sign that the knowledge is still here, waiting for the right eyes to see it. And still, the villagers don't talk about it. They just keep the doors locked and the stories alive in case the past ever decides to knock. You see it now, don't you? That unshakable sense that history is never truly buried. The Priory of Sion's secrets whisper through time, waiting for someone to listen. The questions remain. Who were these people? What did they guard so fiercely? And why does the wind still carry their names through these ancient stones? There's no one left to solve the mystery. No living voice to ask. Just the silence of the stones and the memory of those who once walked these halls. So we carry their story forward, not in fear, but in wonder. A reminder that history is not just the past, it's the echo in the bones of the present. You know, sometimes the most chilling stories are the ones that never quite end. The Priory of Sion may have faded from the headlines, but its whispers linger in the dark corners of history. We've traveled far, but the road ahead is never truly empty. The past is always just beyond the veil, waiting for the right light to reveal its secrets. So, if you're ready for another tale, I'll be right here with a cup of tea and a fire that never quite goes out. Now, let's turn the page. There's always another story waiting, just beyond the silence. You've heard of the Priory of Sion, haven't you? A place where whispers echo through the stone like the wind through a hollow tree, and the air feels just a little too still for comfort. It's not just a building, it's a story, a secret that's been buried for centuries, and the walls themselves seem to remember what happened there. Some say the voices you hear are the spirits of the past. Others say they're the echoes of a truth that's been hidden too well. But one thing's for sure, no one leaves the Priory of Sion the same. So, what do you think? Are you ready to listen to the whispers that still linger in the walls? The Priory of Sion began in the 12th century when a group of knights and scholars gathered in the shadow of the Pyrenees. They were seekers of truth, guarding ancient knowledge passed down through the ages. Who among them truly knew what they were protecting? These men were not just warriors, they were philosophers, guardians of a hidden lineage. Their mission was to protect a sacred manuscript said to contain the wisdom of the ancients. What would happen if that manuscript ever fell into the wrong hands? Among them was a woman named Beatrice, whose lineage was said to trace back to the Knights of the Temple. She was both protector and questioner, wondering if the truth was worth the cost of her life. Over the centuries, the priory changed hands, became a refuge, then a place of exile. Some say it was where the last of the Templars hid. Others claim it was a secret meeting place for those who sought to preserve the world's oldest truths. But as the years passed, whispers began to rise from the walls, echoes of those who had once stood where we now stand, guarding a truth that time could never erase. You remember how the wind used to whistle through those old stone corridors, like a child trying to make itself heard. But now it's different. It's not just the wind, it's something else, something watching. One morning, the cook found a single, unbroken thread on the floor, leading to the chapel. She didn't say a word, just picked it up and walked away, her face pale as the morning light. Then there was the silence. The silence that didn't belong. It came at night, when the fires were low and the ghosts were restless. It wasn't the absence of sound, it was the presence of something that didn't want to be heard. The nuns started to vanish, one by one. No one dared ask where they went, but you could feel it in the air, like a hush before a storm, like the weight of a secret that had been carried too long. And then, one day, the abbot came back. Not the same abbot, not the one who had ever lived. He stood in the chapel, his eyes hollow, and whispered, "The walls remember." You remember the old stories about the Priory of Sion, don't you? The one where the monks vanished in the dead of night, leaving behind only whispers in the stone. They say the last monk, Brother Alaric, was heard in the chapel, singing a hymn that had no words, just a sound like wind through hollow bones. They searched for days, but the priory's walls swallowed every clue. All that remained was a single, bloodless handprint on the windowpane, and a silence that stretched like a shroud. No one ever found him, but the priory still whispers. And if you listen closely, you can hear his voice, calling to the lost, the lonely, and the ones who have never found peace. I spoke with a woman who said she heard the voices in the priory's library, whispers that followed her like shadows, never quite making sense, but always just close enough to make her turn. She described the voices as soft and familiar, like old friends from long ago, but when she tried to reach out, they'd vanish into the silence, leaving only the weight of absence behind. He said it looked like a monk, but the face was wrong, too old, too young, too much like the faces of people he'd lost, and never quite right. Some say the priory doesn't just house ghosts, it remembers the ones who came before, and waits for the ones who stay too long. And if you ever find yourself walking those halls, listen closely, because the walls don't just whisper, they hum with stories that haven't finished being told. We began the investigation with a simple question: what if the whispers were real? The priory's stones, so old and weathered, seemed to hum with a story that had been waiting to be heard. The first clue was a faded journal found in the basement, its pages brittle with age. The handwriting was shaky, like the writer had been in a hurry or afraid. We followed the trail of names: monks, nuns, scholars, and a few who had vanished without a trace. The more we uncovered, the more the walls seemed to close in. Then there was the sound, a low, rhythmic tapping, like fingers on a piano. It came at night, just before the first light of dawn, and never repeated the same pattern twice. The investigation led us deeper into the past, where history and myth began to blur. The walls were not just stone, they were memory, waiting for the right hands to listen. You know, the thing that's always bugged me about the Priory of Sion is the one detail that has never been explained: the stone door. It's still there, untouched, sealed with a rusted iron lock that's never been opened. Every time they tried to get in, the lock just wouldn't budge. They'd pry, they'd saw, they'd even try to melt the metal with a torch. But the lock, it was like it was waiting for something. It's not like the rest of the priory was untouched. The walls still echo, the windows still weep rain, the stones still whisper. But this door? It's the only thing that's never been opened. and I can't stop thinking about what's inside. Maybe it's not the lock that's holding it back. Maybe it's the silence inside. The silence that's been waiting for someone to finally listen. You've heard the tales, but what do the locals really believe? Some say the priory is cursed by the blood of its first abbess, who drowned herself in the moat after a forbidden love affair. Others claim the whispers are the voices of the nuns who vanished during the French Revolution, trapped between the stones, still singing their prayers in the wind. And then there's the theory that the priory was built on ancient pagan sites, and the whispers are the spirits of the old gods, still waiting for their worshippers to return. But no one can agree on the truth. Some say it's just the wind, others say it's the past refusing to stay buried. And you've always wondered, haven't you? You know, sometimes the most haunting things aren't the ghosts but the silence that follows. The silence after the last whisper fades, and the walls just stop. No echo, no sound, just the weight of it. They say the walls don't just speak, they remember. And if they remember, then maybe they still wait for someone to listen. Someone who knows how to hear. There's a theory, you see, that the whispers weren't just of the past, that they were warnings from someone who knew the truth and who was silenced before they could say it. Quick word from our sponsor. If this sounds like something you'd enjoy, take a look at the Fire TV Stick 4K streaming device. There's a link and a QR code on screen right now and in the description below. Alright, back to it. And that's the thing about the priory. It doesn't just haunt you. It makes you wonder if you've ever really known what's real, or if you've just been listening all along. So, if you ever find yourself standing there on the edge of the priory, listen closely. Because sometimes, the walls don't just whisper, they hum, and they're still waiting. You've followed the echoes through shadowed halls and ancient stone, and now, as the firelight flickers, you're left with the feeling that the walls still listen. What do you think they're whispering now, just beyond your hearing? The priory of Sion may be silent now, but the stories it holds are never truly done. Do you believe some places are only haunted when we're ready to hear them? So, dear listener, as the evening deepens, let's leave the whispers behind and step into a tale where the truth is as cold as the grave. The fire is low, the stories are many, and the road ahead is dark. Are you ready for the next one? You've heard of the Thompson House, haven't you? A place where the walls don't just echo, they scream. It's not the kind of scream you can explain with a broken window or a wild wind. Built in the late 1800s by a wealthy industrialist, it was supposed to be a grand estate. But rumors say the man's wife died under mysterious circumstances and her spirit never left. Some say the screams only come at night, when the wind is still and the world holds its breath. Others say it's the sound of a child crying, echoing through the halls. And then there are the disappearances. People who went to investigate, or just to visit, and never came back. The house doesn't just haunt, it hides. But why does it scream? And who or what is still inside? That's the question that lingers, like the echo of a voice you can't quite place. You know, the Thompson House wasn't always a scream. It started as a humble clapboard cottage, built by a man named Elias Thompson in the early 1800s, a man who believed in the power of quiet and hard work. Elias was a farmer, but he had a secret: he was a gambler, and his debts led to a very dark turn. One night, he borrowed money from a man named Blackwell, a man who didn't take kindly to being cheated. The debt was paid in blood, or so the story goes. Elias was found dead in the woods, and Blackwell vanished, leaving behind only a trail of whispers and the echo of a scream that never stopped. The house was left empty for years, until a new family came to live there, drawn by the promise of a fresh start and the allure of a place that had seen too much. They didn't know what they were getting into, but they were the last to live there, and the walls began to scream the moment the first night of their stay fell silent. You remember the first time you heard it, don't you? A low, keening sound, like a child's cry trapped in a hollow stone. It came from the walls, not the air, and it didn't stop. Neighbors said it was the wind, or maybe the creak of old wood. But you knew better. The sound was too precise, too deliberate, like a voice trying to reach through the stone. One night, you decided to stay. You brought a flashlight, a journal, and a lot of questions. You didn't know what you were looking for, but you knew something was watching. And that's when you heard it again, clearer, closer. Not a sound, but a whisper, like the walls themselves were trying to tell you something you weren't ready to hear. You see it now, the house, the Thompson House, standing at the edge of the woods, its windows dark and its walls thick with secrets. The air feels heavier here, like the past is pressing down on you. One night in 1952, a young woman named Clara Thompson vanished without a sound. Her mother found her bedroom door ajar, the bed untouched, and the scent of lavender lingering in the air. Now, decades later, the house still whispers. Some say you can hear Clara's voice in the walls, a soft, echoing lullaby, as if she never truly left. Others say it's not Clara's voice at all, but the house itself, trying to remember what it lost. The walls are still screaming, but not in words, just in silence. So, what do you think? Was Clara taken, or did she choose to stay? The house won't tell us, but it will keep whispering, as long as someone is listening. One woman swore she heard a child's laughter echoing down the hallway, only to find the house utterly silent when she turned around. A retired teacher claimed she saw a shadowy figure standing in the doorway, but when she stepped closer, it vanished like smoke. A local historian recounted how the house was built on the site of an old burial ground, and the whispers are the voices of the buried. Some say the screams are not from the past, but from the present, trapped souls still searching for peace, still waiting to be heard. We started with the basics: old blueprints, yellowed photographs, and a few brave souls willing to step inside. The walls, they said, didn't just echo, they screamed. The first team in was a retired sheriff and a historian. They brought flashlights and silence, but the house had other plans. Doors creaked open on their own, and the air smelled like burnt sugar and something old. One night, they found a diary tucked inside a loose floorboard. It was written in the 1920s, and every page described the same thing: the walls weeping, the voices in the dark, and a child who never left. The diary hinted at a hidden room beneath the kitchen. We dug carefully, with a sense of reverence. What we found wasn't a ghost, it was a lock of hair, a child's doll, and a single, bloodied handprint. The team didn't stay long after that. They said the house was waiting for something or someone, and the walls, they said, were still whispering, though no one could tell you what they were saying. You know, the thing that really nags at me is this one detail that has never been explained. The sound, the scream, it's not just loud. It's like someone's voice is being stretched and twisted, as if they're trapped in a nightmare they can't wake up from. No one's ever been able to confirm who the voice belongs to. Some say it's the daughter, others the husband, but there's no proof, just whispers and a lot of silence. You'd think that would be enough to put the mystery to rest. And then there's the fact that the scream stops the moment the house is empty, like it's waiting for someone to be there to hear it, to understand it, to finally let it out. So what's the real story here? Is it a ghost, a curse, or something far more personal, something that was never meant to be spoken aloud? I think the answer might be in the silence that follows the scream, the silence that no one ever talks about. Maybe that's where the real mystery lies. You've heard the whispers, haven't you? The ones that say the Thompson house isn't just haunted, it's cursed. Some say the walls don't just scream, they weep. Local tales say the family that lived there in the 1890s was locked in a love triangle so fierce, it turned the house into a tomb of silence and sorrow. The walls, they say, remember every cry. Some say the screams you hear aren't from the past, they're from the present, that the house has a way of pulling in the lonely, the desperate, and the ones who have never found peace. And then there are the theories. The one about the hidden room beneath the floorboards. The one about the ghostly child who never grew up. The one that says the house is still waiting for someone to finally listen. You know, sometimes the most chilling thing about a haunted house isn't the ghost, but the silence that follows. The kind of silence that lingers like a secret, refusing to be spoken. The Thompson house has been studied, probed, and even rebuilt, but no one has ever been able to find the source of the screams. They say it's in the walls, but it's not just sound, it's memory, and it's still waiting to be heard. The locals still tell stories about the Thompson house, but they don't always end the same way. Some say the screams are still there, just waiting for the right person to listen. And that's why we're still here, still listening, because sometimes the most haunted places are the ones that never let go. You've heard the whispers in the walls, felt the cold breath of something ancient, and wondered if the house was screaming or if you were the one being watched. Sometimes, the scariest stories aren't the ones that end with a ghost or a curse, but the ones that leave you wondering if you ever really left. The Thompson house may have its secrets, but you'll always carry the one that lingers in your own quiet moments, when the world feels still and heavy. Before we move on, I wonder, did you ever hear a whisper in your own walls? Or did you just imagine it? Stay with me, dear listener, and let's see what else the night has in store. You've heard of haunted houses, but have you ever heard of the Thompson house? It's not just a place, it's a whisper in the dark, a name that lingers like a ghost in the wind. You've probably heard the stories, but have you ever wondered what really happened there? Built in the late 1800s, the Thompson house was once a proud family home, filled with laughter and life. But something changed. The Thompsons vanished, and with them, the warmth of the place. Now, it stands alone, forgotten by time and the world. Quick word from our sponsor. If this sounds like something you'd enjoy, take a look at the Apple AirPods 2nd generation. There's a link and a QR code on screen right now, and in the description below. Alright, back to it. The first reports of something strange happened in the 1930s. A young couple, newlyweds, bought the house for a fraction of its worth. They said it was perfect except for the whispers in the night, the cold spots in the corners, and the feeling that they were never truly alone. They never returned. The house was abandoned again, but the stories didn't stop. Locals say the Thompson spirits still wander the halls, searching for something they left behind. Some say they were murdered, others say they were cursed, but no one knows for sure. And now, as we walk through the door, we're not just visiting a house. We're stepping into a story that's been waiting a long time to be told. Are you ready to uncover the truth behind the Thompson house? You ever heard of a house that was built on a grave? Well, the Thompson house wasn't just built on a grave, it was built on a forgotten war. In 1863, during the Civil War, a Union regiment was stationed here. They built the house as a makeshift hospital, but the soldiers didn't stay long. Many died of disease, and their bodies were buried in the woods. The Thompson family bought the land in 1871, thinking they were getting a fresh start. But the house had a different idea. It had been built on a place where death was a way of life. The first Thompson to live there, Margaret, said she heard whispers in the night. She claimed the house was haunted by the soldiers who had died in its walls. She never let anyone inside after that. The family moved out in 1902, but the house stayed. It became a place of rumors, of cold spots, of voices that only the oldest servants could hear. And it was never the same again. You remember the first time you noticed something wasn't quite right. It was a quiet Tuesday, the kind of day where the world feels like it's holding its breath. You were just about to pour yourself a cup of tea when the lights flickered and the clock on the wall stopped dead in the middle of the hour. The next morning, you found the back door ajar, the floorboards creaking like they were trying to warn you. There were no signs of forced entry, just a deep, lingering scent of something sweet and wrong lingering in the air like burnt sugar and old paper. Then came the whispers, not the kind you hear when you're half asleep, but real, clear, and coming from the walls. You thought you were imagining it at first, but the sound was too precise, too deliberate, like it was trying to tell you something you weren't ready to hear. The first time you saw it, you thought it was just a trick of the light, but the figure was too clear, too real, and it stood just inside the doorway, watching you with eyes that seemed to know exactly what you were thinking. You tried to convince yourself it was just your mind playing tricks, but the feeling that something was watching you never left. It was like the house itself had become aware of your presence and wasn't sure whether to welcome or warn you. You ever notice how some places just hum with a kind of sorrow? The Thompson house isn't just old, it's like it's holding its breath, waiting for something to finally break. In the spring of 1948, a young mother named Clara Thompson vanished without a sound. No screams, no struggle, just a locked door and a child left alone in the dark. Clara's daughter, Leila, never spoke of her mother again. She moved away, but the house kept her in its grip. You can still hear her whispering in the wind, asking for her mother to come home. The Thompson house doesn't just haunt, it lingers. It waits for the next person to walk through its doors to feel the cold touch of something that was never meant to stay. I've spoken to dozens of people who say they saw the Thompson house from a distance, its silhouette against the sky like a skeletal hand reaching for the clouds. One man swore he saw a light flickering from the second floor, even though the windows were boarded up. Another woman said she saw a figure standing at the front door, watching her as she passed. She described it as tall, in a long coat, and with eyes that seemed to follow her across the street. Some say the house seems to move. One eyewitness claimed that the front porch steps appeared to shift position overnight, as if the house was trying to escape its own foundation. And then there's the sound. A man who lived nearby for years insists he heard a child's laughter echoing from the house, only to realize it was his own daughter playing in the yard. But he says it was too far away for that to be true. These aren't just stories. They're the kind of things that make you look over your shoulder long after you've left the neighborhood. We started with the basics, old deeds, newspaper clippings, and the local librarian who knew every ghost story in town. The first thing we found was a 1923 article about a woman named Eleanor Thompson who vanished without a trace. The article described a woman who left her home in the middle of the night, her door left ajar. No footprints, no witnesses, just a trail of faint perfume that led to the woods. We followed the trail of whispers, talking to the descendants of the Thompson family. One woman, a great-granddaughter, told us she'd seen a shadow in the hallway at night, and it always smelled like lavender. The deeper we dug, the more the house seemed to whisper. We found old photographs of the Thompson family, but in one, a woman with the same eyes as Eleanor stood in the doorway, just outside the frame. There were no bodies, no graves, just a house that remembered. And the more we uncovered, the more we realized that some legacies don't end, they just wait for the right time to come back. You ever wonder why some stories just stop? Like, the last thing we know is a door slamming and then silence. But there's one detail that's always been left hanging like a thread pulled from a tapestry. It's not the disappearance, or the ghost, or the curse. It's the one thing that no one ever saw, and no one ever heard. Just avoid where an answer should be. They say the last person to leave the house was a woman in a yellow dress, walking toward the woods. But no one saw her. No one heard her. Just a door that never opened again. So here's the thing. The house still stands. The woods still whisper. And the one detail? It's still waiting for someone to look for it. Maybe you will be the one. Some say the Thompson house wasn't built on cursed land, it was built on a body. The town's oldest cemetery, where the family's first patriarch was laid to rest, still has a stone with a strange, unmarked grave. Locals whisper that the house itself is a tomb, and the spirits are just visitors. Another theory is that the Thompsons were cursed by their own greed. The house was built on a gold mine, but the family's fortune vanished overnight. Some say the gold was cursed, and the house was built with it. Now, the gold still lies beneath the floorboards, and the ghosts are just trying to find it. Some say the house is haunted not by the Thompsons, but by the people who tried to save them. A local historian claims that the family was known for their kindness, but their last act was to shelter a runaway slave. The ghost of the slave is said to appear in the attic, always looking for a way out. And then there are the children's stories, the ones that say the Thompson house is still alive, that it watches, that it waits, that it's not just haunted, it's hunting. And if you ever hear the sound of a child laughing in the woods, you'd better run, because that's the house, and it's never done with us. You've heard the stories, but the truth is still buried beneath the floorboards. No one knows what really happened that night, and no one's ever found the body. The house has been empty for decades, but the wind still whispers through the hollowed-out walls. Some say it's the voice of the lost soul, others say it's just the house remembering. The sheriff's file is still open, the case unsolved. Some say it was a tragedy, others say it was murder. But the truth, it's been lost to time, like the body that never made it to the grave. And so the house waits, a silent witness to the years that have passed. You'll never know what happened, but you'll always wonder if the house still remembers. You could almost hear the whispers fading into the wind, like the last sigh of a weary soul. The Thompson house has its secrets, but sometimes the quietest moments hold the most weight. Some say the house is still waiting for the one who never returned, or for the truth that was buried with them. But truth, like ghosts, often lingers longer than we expect. But before we move on, I wonder, what ghosts have you seen in your own lives? And what stories do you think still wait, just beyond the edge of your memory? Stay with me, dear listener. There's always more to come, and sometimes the most chilling stories are the ones that never quite end. You've heard of the Priory of Sion, haven't you? A secret society, a conspiracy, a whisper of ancient bloodlines. But what if it was never just a society? What if it was a prison? Quick word from our sponsor. If this sounds like something you'd enjoy, take a look at the Stanley Quencher 40 Oz Tumblr. There's a link and a QR code on screen right now, and in the description below. Alright, back to it. Nestled in the hills of France, it's said to have been built in the 12th century, hidden from the world. But the locals never talk about it. They just look away. They say the monks who lived there vanished without a trace. Some say they were murdered. Others claim they were taken by the very secrets they guarded. But what secrets could be so dangerous that they needed a whole priory to hide them? And now, more than 800 years later, people still claim to hear voices in the stones, to see shadows in the halls, to feel the weight of history pressing down from the past, like the priory itself is still waiting for someone to listen. You know, the Priory of Sion didn't start as a haunted place, but as a secret society. It began in the 12th century, hidden in the shadows of the French countryside. The founders were scholars, philosophers, and protectors of ancient wisdom. But they also had a very specific mission, to safeguard the bloodline of Jesus Christ. They called themselves the Priory of Sion, but in reality, they were a secret brotherhood. Their members included nobles, knights, and even a few women, unusual for the time. They believed they were the true heirs to Christ, and their mission was to preserve his legacy from the corruption of the church. But this wasn't just about faith, it was also about power. The priory believed they had the knowledge to outmaneuver the church and protect the truth. They kept their secrets in coded manuscripts, hidden in secret vaults, and passed down through generations of trusted members. The priory operated in the shadows for centuries, but they weren't always successful. There were betrayals, secret alliances, and even the occasional murder. Their legacy is a mix of mystery, faith, and the kind of power that can turn a noble cause into something darker. And so, the Priory of Sion became more than just a secret society. It became a symbol of the struggle between truth and deception, between light and darkness. And somewhere in the misty hills of France, their legacy still lingers, waiting to be uncovered. You remember how things started to shift, didn't you? The first time you noticed the candles flickered not just with the wind, but with something else, something ancient and watching. Then came the whispers, just a breath of sound, like a sigh caught in the air, but it wasn't the wind. You turned, but there was nothing there, just the silence pressing in harder. One morning, you found the books moved, not just shifted slightly, but rearranged as if by an unseen hand. Old tomes that had been in the same place for decades, now lined up in a pattern that made your skin crawl. You began to see the faces in the mirrors, not the reflection of yourself, but something else, someone who had been there before you, watching you from the glass, waiting for you to notice. And then, the cold, not just the chill of the room, but a sudden, sharp drop in temperature, like the air had been drawn away, leaving you standing in the middle of a vacuum of warmth. You started to wonder if you were the first to notice or if you were the last. You remember the moment it all went quiet, don't you? The silence that wrapped around the priory like a shroud, so thick it felt like the world had forgotten to breathe. The last known sound was the echo of a child's laugh, soft, distant, and then nothing, as if the walls had swallowed the sound whole, leaving only the weight of absence. They found the diary later, tucked beneath the floorboards. Its pages were yellowed, the ink faded, but the words were sharp as a knife, pages filled with pleas, warnings, and a name that never made sense. The final entry was scrawled in a frantic hand: "He's not gone. He is still here, and he's waiting for the next one." That's when the silence became a warning. The disappearance never made the news. No one asked questions, but the priory, it still waits, like a story never told, for the next soul brave enough to listen. I met an old friend of the family who swore the priory's stone walls still whisper. She said the wind carries their voices like a lullaby from a long-dead child. She described a young girl, no older than 6, running through the gardens with a lantern. The light flickered like a candle in the dark, and the girl never turned back. Another witness told me about a man who found a sealed letter in the library. It was written in a child's hand, begging for help, and signed with a name that wasn't on any birth record. The most unsettling account came from a local historian. He said the priory's keepers always warned against the old legend of the child who never grew up. He claimed the last keeper who tried to leave never returned. His footprints were found in the snow, but no one could find his body. We followed the trail of old maps and whispered names until we found the ruins of the priory itself. The stones stood like ancient sentinels, half buried in ivy and time. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of damp earth and something older, like memory itself. We found a hidden chamber, sealed with a rusted iron door and a single, blood-stained sigil. We found records of secret meetings, coded messages, and even a name: Elias de Vries, a man who vanished in the 16th century, leaving behind only a ledger of names and a final, unanswered question. The deeper we dug, the more the past seemed to reach for us. We found no bodies, but we found a pattern, a chain of disappearances tied to the same symbol and the same name. What did they know that we don't? And why does the past still whisper in the wind, as if waiting for someone to listen? You know, there's one thing about the priory of Sion that's always left me wondering: why did they never explain how they got those ancient manuscripts in the first place? It's like they had this secret way in, but no one ever talks about it. Was it a hidden door, a secret passage, or maybe a trick of the light that only the initiated could see? I've read every book, watched every documentary, and still, no one seems to know. It's like the truth about that first acquisition was buried with the priory itself, never to be unearthed. Maybe that's the real curse, keeping secrets too long. Some things are better left in the dark, even if they're not quite as dark as they used to be. You've heard the rumors, but let me tell you what the locals really whisper. They say the priory's ghosts are just the echoes of those who refused to let go of the past. Some say the priory's curse is tied to a secret buried in the soil, something the monks tried to hide, and something that still haunts the land. Others say it's not the priory itself that's cursed, but the people who stayed behind after the last bell tolled. And then there are the ones who say the real curse isn't in the stones, but in the stories, that the priory is just a place where the lonely and the lost find a home. So what do you think? Is the priory a place of sorrow, or a place where the lost finally find peace? You ever wonder what happens when a secret is buried deeper than the earth? The priory of Sion's mystery hasn't just faded, it's grown cold, like a shadow that won't let go. There are whispers now of a hidden archive beneath the ruins, a place where the truth might still sleep, waiting for the right hands to wake it. And yet, no one has dared to go back. The silence is too heavy, the story's too tangled. You could say the priory's curse is still waiting for its next victim. So here's the thing, the mystery isn't over, it's just sleeping. And sometimes the best stories are the ones that never end. You've heard the whispers of the priory of Sion, but have you ever wondered what lies beyond the veil of history? The past is never truly gone, it just waits in the shadows. Some say the stones remember, and the wind carries their secrets. But what if the real curse isn't in the past, but in the stories we choose to believe? The stories we tell shape the way we see the world and sometimes the way the world sees us. So, what will you choose to believe next? Stay with me, dear listener, and let's not part ways just yet. There are more tales to tell, and the shadows are always listening. You've heard of places that whisper secrets, but Whitley Bay Asylum? That place has a voice that echoes through the empty halls, calling out to the lost children who never left. Built in the 1890s, it was supposed to be a place of healing. Instead, it became a prison for the broken, the neglected, and the forgotten. The children? They were never meant to be there at all. The locals say the asylum still holds its breath, that every night, the wind howls through the windows and the silence is too heavy to be real. It's not just the stories, it's the feeling, the way the air shifts when you're alone there. And then there are the voices, whispered prayers, sobs, and the sound of small feet running, always running down the corridors. Some say they hear the children, but no one dares to say what they really heard. Whitley Bay Asylum isn't just haunted, it's a place where the past still lives and the children who were never meant to be there are still waiting for someone to listen. Quick word from our sponsor. If this sounds like something you'd enjoy, take a look at the Fire TV Stick 4K streaming device. There's a link and a QR code on screen right now, and in the description below. Alright, back to it. You ever heard of a place where the walls remember the children? Whitley Bay Asylum started in 1865, a time when the world was still figuring out how to care for the broken. It was built with the best intentions, though the stones didn't know it yet. The founder, a man named Henry Whitley, was a doctor with a heart full of hope and a mind full of questions. He believed in treating the sick with kindness, not chains. But even the best intentions can take a dark turn when the world isn't ready for change. At first, the asylum was a place of healing where the sick and the troubled found a home. But as the years passed, the stories changed. Some say the patients became more than patients, they became voices in the walls, echoes in the halls. The staff, too, grew eerie. Nurses and doctors, all doing their best, but the burden of care became too much. Some say they heard whispers in the night or saw shadows in the corridors, and some say they left the asylum changed or never left at all. By the 1920s, the asylum had become a place of fear. The doors were locked at night, and the staff kept to themselves. Some say that children were never really gone, they just found a new home in the walls, waiting for the right moment to be heard. And so, the history of Whitley Bay Asylum is written in whispers and shadows. A place of hope, then fear, and now, a place where the past refuses to stay buried. You remember the first time you heard the whispers in the halls of the old Whitley Bay Asylum. A soft, almost musical sound, like the wind through the trees, but it wasn't the wind. It was something else entirely, something that had been there all along, waiting for the right moment to speak. The nurses said it was just the wind, or maybe the building settling. But you noticed the way the dust on the floor moved, even though the windows were closed, and the way the light seemed to shift just when you weren't looking. The staff started leaving in the middle of the night, claiming they had to go home. No one believed them, but you could see the fear in their eyes. It wasn't just the asylum anymore, it was something else, something that had taken root in the walls and the bones of the place. And then, the first real sign, a child's drawing left on the wall, done in chalk, with no one around to make it. It was a simple drawing. A boy with big eyes and a smile, but something about it felt wrong, like it was trying to tell you something you weren't ready to hear. You told yourself it was just a child's imagination, or maybe a prank, but deep down, you knew better. The whispers, the cold, the fear in the nurse's eyes, it was all leading to something, and you were beginning to wonder if you were the one who had been waiting for it all along. You see it now, don't you? That little girl with the wild curls, running through the halls of the asylum, her laughter echoing down the corridors like a ghost trying to find its way home. One moment she's chasing a butterfly through the dust-laden air, the next she's gone. Just like that. And the walls, they don't remember. They only remember the sound of her voice, the echo of her name. And then, the night she vanished, the lights went out. Not just the lights, but the sound of her laughter. The silence was so thick, it felt like the building was holding its breath. They say she was taken. But by whom? The nurses, the doctors, or something far worse? And why does the building still remember her, even when no one else does? The question that lingers in the silence is this: if she was never here, then who is she? And why does the asylum still remember her name? I've heard the stories from the locals, folks who grew up near Whitley Bay. They say the children don't just vanish, they're here, watching, waiting. You ever notice how the wind sometimes sounds like whispers? One man claims he saw a child with hollow eyes standing at the edge of the woods just staring at him. He didn't run, he didn't blink, just stood there, like it was waiting for something. Another woman said she heard laughter, high and shrill, coming from the old asylum at night. She said it sounded like children playing, but when she looked, there was no one there, just the echo of something alive. Some say the children are just the memory of the place, the weight of all those lost souls, but others swear they're still there, waiting for someone to listen, to remember, to finally let them go. And if you're ever walking near Whitley Bay and you feel a chill or hear a voice calling your name, don't look back. Just walk on, but don't forget to say a prayer for the children who never made it out. We started with the old records, you know, those yellowed pages and brittle paper. The first thing we found was a name that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up: Leela Mee Thompson. She was only 8 when she vanished from the asylum's records in 1942. The nurses said she was a quiet girl, always drawing in the margins of her notebook. But her last entry was a single line: "They're watching me in the mirror." That was the last anyone saw of her. Then there was the diary. It was found tucked in the floorboards of an old patient room, hidden beneath a loose floorboard. The entries were written in a shaky hand, like the writer was afraid to let the words out. One entry read, "The walls are alive. They whisper my name in the dark. I don't know if they're real or just my mind playing tricks, but I feel them watching." It's the kind of thing that makes your spine tingle, don't you think? And then there was the most unsettling thing of all, the sound. When we played the old audio recordings, we heard a faint, rhythmic tapping, like someone was trying to communicate through the walls. It stopped the moment we turned the volume up. It's like the asylum itself is trying to tell us something. But what? And why does it feel like we are being watched as we listen? You've heard the whispers of the Whitley Bay Asylum, but there's one detail that's never been explained. A name carved into the stone that doesn't match any of the children who vanished. It's like a ghost in the system, waiting to be found. They found the name in the archives, buried beneath decades of redacted records. No birth certificate, no family, no trace of where she came from. Just a single name, like a secret left behind by someone who didn't want to be forgotten. It's strange, isn't it? How a child who never existed still left her mark. Like she was never really gone, just waiting for someone to look closely enough to see her. And now, you're wondering, what if she's still here? What if she never left? What if she's the one who's been waiting all these years for someone to finally listen? Some say the whispers come from the trees. Others swear they hear the children's laughter in the wind. But most of all, they say the asylum's walls still remember the ones who never left. The locals won't talk much about the place, but they'll tell you the children aren't the only ones who got trapped there. Some say the nurses, too, vanished without a trace, their names erased from the records. There's a theory, though, that the asylum wasn't just a place for the sick, it was a place for the lost. Some believe the children were never truly patients, but victims of a darker purpose. And then there's the one who claims to have seen them just once. A woman in her 70s, who says she stood on the hill at midnight and saw a line of children dressed in white, walking toward the sea. But the truth? It's buried under layers of silence, time, and the kind of fear that doesn't fade. You don't have to believe it, but you'd be a fool not to wonder. There are still no answers, just whispers in the wind and a cold silence where children once laughed. Did they vanish, or did they simply choose to disappear? The local paper once ran an article about the missing kids, but it was buried under stories of fire and flood. No one wanted to talk about it, even then. You've heard the stories, but have you ever wondered what it was like to be one of them? What it was like to be lost in a place that was supposed to be safe? The mystery isn't just about the past. It lingers here, in the air, in the silence, and in the hearts of those who still remember. And maybe, just maybe, it's waiting for someone to finally say, what if? You know, sometimes the ghosts don't need to shout. They just need to whisper your name in the dark, and you'll hear it clearer than any scream. There's something about the silence between the stories that makes the most sense. It's where the real truth lies, hidden in the spaces we don't talk about. Maybe the real horror isn't the ghosts we see, but the ones we've forgotten. And maybe that's the scariest thing of all. So, before we move on to the next tale, I'll leave you with this: the past doesn't stay buried. It just waits for the right moment to rise. You've heard of the SS Mignon, a ship that vanished without a sound, leaving behind only whispers and a trail of unanswered questions. But what if the sea itself is still holding its breath, waiting for the truth to surface? Quick word from our sponsor. If this sounds like something you'd enjoy, take a look at the Apple AirPods 2nd generation. There's a link and a QR code on screen right now, and in the description below. Alright, back to it. Built in the early 1900s, the Mignon was a modest luxury liner, known for its elegant design and quiet charm. But its final voyage was anything but quiet, or so the stories say. In the decades since, the Mignon has become more than a ship, it's a legend. A ghost in the waves, a warning in the wind, a mystery that lingers in the hearts of those who dare to imagine its fate. And now, as we step aboard this story, we're not just chasing a ghost. We're following a trail of silence, a trail that has led to more than just a ship disappearing. It's led to a place where the past refuses to let go. You see it now, the **** a trim, elegant ocean liner, all polished brass and staterooms with the kind of grandeur that made the wealthy dream of a trip to the West Indies. It was built in 1921, a time when the seas were still wide and uncharted, and the promise of adventure was as real as the scent of salt water in the air. And then there was the first officer, Eleanor Voss, sharp, clever, and with a reputation for solving problems before they ever became crises. Together, they charted the course of the ****, a voyage that would eventually lead to the most chilling mystery of the century. You remember the day the **** left port, didn't you? The sky was a soft blue, the sea calm, and the crew cheerful. But as the sun dipped low, the mood shifted, like the air itself holding its breath. The first real sign was the radio silence. No call signs, no distress signals, just a sudden cut to static. The captain, a man with a calm demeanor, grew quiet, staring at the horizon like he'd seen something no one else could. The crew started to act strange. Some would vanish for hours, others would whisper to themselves, their voices low and urgent. It was like the ship was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. And then, the compasses began to spin wildly. No wind, no current, just a feeling that the *** was being pulled in a direction it wasn't meant to go. The crew looked at each other, and for the first time, fear crept into their eyes. You can almost hear the silence now, can't you? That still, heavy air before the storm, before the ship vanished. The *** was never the same after that day, and neither were those who sailed with her. You see it now, the ***, a sleek, white ocean liner, its hull gleaming under a pale, overcast sky. The year is 1944, and the ship is bound for New York, carrying a quiet, unremarkable cargo of passengers and hope. No one remembers the exact moment it vanished. Some say it was a storm, others say it was a ghost, a ship that never should have existed. But the truth, it simply disappeared, like smoke in the morning light. Some say the ship was cursed. Others say it was a secret experiment, something more than a ship, more than a vessel of people. But the real question is, what did it take to make a ship vanish without a trace? And then there's the last radio transmission, a woman's voice, barely audible, saying, "We're not going to make it." No one heard it, no one believed it, but it was real, and it was the last thing anyone ever heard from the ***. So, what do you think happened? Did the ship sink? Was it taken by something we can't see? Or did it simply vanish? And if it did, where did it go? And more importantly, what's still waiting for us on the other side? I met a woman in a small coastal town who said she saw the *** in a fog so thick, it felt like the ship was breathing. She swore the lights on the deck blinked like a warning, and the smokestacks swayed even though the wind had died. She said the crew was on deck, waving like they were trying to reach someone or something on the shore. She couldn't tell if they were alive or just shadows, but the way they moved, it was like they were being pulled under the sea. Another fisherman said he heard a siren that wasn't a siren at all. It was a woman's voice, low and sweet, calling his name. He said it felt like the ship was trying to talk to him, to tell him where it was going. He never saw the ship again, but he swore he felt its presence for weeks. The tide would pull him toward the shore, and he'd always wake up with a cold spot on his neck, like someone had pressed their hand against his skin. These stories don't add up, but they do add to the weight of the ***'s silence. Every survivor says the same thing: the ship wasn't lost. It was taken, and it's still here, waiting for someone to listen. We follow the trail of the *** to a weathered dock in Port Said, where the water still lingers with old secrets. The air smelled of salt and decay, and the wind carried the echo of a song no one could remember. The local fisherman, Old Mahmood, told us the *** never left the harbor. He said the captain had a habit of disappearing into the night, leaving only a trail of salt and silence behind. Strange symbols were carved into the hull, not by any known language, but by something ancient. They pulsed faintly in the dark, like the memory of a heartbeat. One of the sailors, now in his 80s, recalled a voice on the radio that night, not from the captain, but from the sea itself. It said, "Come back, or I'll come to you." The investigation led us to a hidden cave beneath the dock, where the last radio transmission was found. It wasn't from the ship, but from the sea, like a voice rising from the depths, calling for help. You know, the most haunting part of this whole story isn't the disappearance or the ship, or even the missing bodies. It's the one thing no one ever figured out. They found the ship's log, the last radio transmission, the names of the passengers, but not a single clue about where they all went. Some say the ship was cursed, others say it was a trap set by the sea itself. But the truth, it's still buried in the fog, waiting for someone to find it. And that, dear friends, is why the SS Mignon never stopped haunting the sea, because no one ever asked the right question. You've heard the stories, but what about the people who still believe in them? Some say the Mignon isn't just a ghost ship, it's a warning. A message in the waves, waiting for the right soul to listen. There's a woman in town who claims her grandfather saw the Mignon on the night of the storm. He said the ship wasn't made of wood, it was made of smoke, and it never left the water. Even today, some say they hear the Mignon on the radio, a faint, distorted voice calling out in the dark like a ship on the edge of the world. But no one can ever find it. And so, the Mignon lingers, not in the sea, not in the sky, but in the stories, in the silence between the waves, in the stories we tell, hoping someone, somewhere, will finally hear it. You know, sometimes the most haunting stories aren't the ones that end, but the ones that simply stuck. The SS Mignon vanished in 1943, and no one has found a single clue. What do you think they are still searching for? Every year, new theories pop up, but none of them feel right. Some say the ship was sabotaged, others say it was a Nazi cover-up, and then there are the whispers, some say it never left port at all. The ocean has a way of keeping secrets, doesn't it? And the Mignon she's still out there, somewhere, waiting. Maybe she's not a ghost, but a warning. A reminder of what happens when you chase something you shouldn't. And so, the Mignon remains a mystery wrapped in fog, a ship that never sailed, and a story that never ends. What do you think will happen next? Will someone finally find her? Or will she always be just out of reach? You know, sometimes the most haunting stories are the ones that fade into the background, like a whisper in the wind. The SS Mignon may be gone, but its echo lingers in the waves. And sometimes, the sea remembers more than we do. It keeps the past in its depths, waiting for the right tide to bring it back up. So, when you hear the waves, don't be surprised if you hear something else too. The sea has a way of telling its own stories. And if you ever find yourself walking along the shore at dusk, keep your eyes open. You never know what might be waiting for you. But remember, my dear, sometimes the most mysterious stories aren't about what disappears but what remains. You've heard the whispers of the Thompson house, haven't you? A place where time seems to freeze and the air is thick with the weight of secrets. It's not just a house, it's a ghost story waiting to be told. Nestled on the edge of a sleepy New England town, it sits like a forgotten relic, its foundation buried beneath the stories of those who once lived there. Some say the house was built on an ancient burial ground. Quick word from our sponsor. If this sounds like something you'd enjoy, take a look at the Stanley Quencher 40 Oz tumbler. There's a link and a QR code on screen right now, and in the description below. Alright, back to it. The Thompson family vanished without a trace over a century ago, leaving behind only their names and the faint echo of their laughter in the halls. But the house? It's still waiting for someone to listen. Some say the house is cursed, others say it's just a place where the past won't let go. But one thing's for sure, if you ever find yourself standing in that yard, the house will remember you. So, dear listener, if you're feeling a little curious, or maybe just a little restless, I'd love to take you inside. But be warned, once you step across that threshold, there's no turning back. The Thompson house didn't start as a haunted place. It began as a family home, built in the 1860s by a man named Elias Thompson, who had a passion for fine woodwork and a quiet obsession with the occult. Elias and his wife, Margaret, moved in with their 2 young children, and life was simple. But whispers started to circulate in the town about strange symbols carved into the woodwork and the way the family seemed to vanish from view at night. One night, during a seance, a terrible thing happened. The family disappeared. No one heard a sound. No one saw them leave. The house stood empty for years, and the town moved on, forgetting the Thompsons' name. But the house never did. When the house was finally abandoned, a local handyman named Frank took it in. He tried to sell it, but no one would buy it. He said the house had a way of making people disappear. He left it, and the house was never sold again. Now, the Thompson house is known as one of the most haunted places in the region. Some say the family is still there, waiting for someone to finally listen. Others say the house is just waiting for its next story to begin. You remember the first time you noticed the house was different? The way the light in the living room seemed to flicker just before the clock struck midnight. Or the way the wind would howl through the trees but never touch the roof. It started with small things, doors that slammed shut on their own, voices in a hall that weren't yours, and the faint scent of lilacs in the air even when the flowers were long gone. One evening, you caught a glimpse of a figure in the window, dressed in a flowing white dress, but when you turned around, the window was dark and still. And then there were the dreams of a child crying in the attic, of a locked door that wouldn't open, of a voice whispering your name just before you woke up. You began to wonder if the house was trying to tell you something, or if you were just the first one to listen. You ever wonder what happens when a house holds more than just memories? The Thompson house doesn't just remember, it wants to be remembered. And it remembers the night the lights went out. The family had just settled in for the night. The father, a quiet man with a love for books, the mother, a seamstress with a gentle touch, and their 2 daughters bright, curious, and full of life. The next morning, the house is silent. The family is gone. No signs of struggle, no belongings left behind. Just a single, unopened letter on the kitchen table, addressed to the mother. The letter reads, "We're not ready to leave. The house is waiting for us." The police called it a disappearance. The townsfolk called it a warning. But the house, it just smiled. And to this day, the Thompson house still waits. But what? For who? No one knows. But if you ever feel a chill in the air, a whisper in the dark, or a strange light in the hallway, you might just be the next letter. I remember the first time I heard about the Thompson house from a neighbor who swore she saw a shadow in the hallway. She said it wasn't a trick of the light, it was something watching her. One woman claimed she was trapped in the house for hours, the doors locked from the outside, the walls whispering her name in a voice that sounded like her own. A local historian told me the Thompson family was known for their kindness, but their final days were shrouded in tragedy and secrecy. No one really knows what happened. And then there was the old caretaker, who lived in the house for decades. He never spoke of the events that led to the house being abandoned, only of the voices that woke him in the night. Some say the Thompson house is a place of memory, not malice. But if you ask me, it's more like a mirror showing us the parts of ourselves we'd rather forget. We began our investigation with a simple task to gather the stories that had been passed down through generations. The first thing we found was a dusty, yellowed envelope tucked inside an old trunk. It contained a single letter, written in a trembling hand, warning of the house's dark past. The letter spoke of a young woman named Clara, who had vanished on the night of the full moon. The townsfolk whispered that she had been lured by a ghostly figure in the woods, but no one could say for certain what had happened to her. The more we learned, the more it felt like the house was watching us. We found a hidden room behind a loose floorboard, filled with old journals and letters, all written in Clara's hand, telling of a love that had gone terribly wrong. The final clue came from a local historian, who told us of a long-forgotten ritual performed on the anniversary of Clara's disappearance. It was said to be a way to silence the spirit, but no one had done it in over a century. We were left with one question. Was Clara a victim, a ghost, or something else entirely? And if she had been silenced, what had she been trying to tell us all this time? You know, there's one thing about the Thompson house that's always puzzled me. No one can say for sure what happened to the last family to live there. They vanished without a trace, and the police never found a single clue. The sheriff said they left everything behind, but the house itself seemed to reject them. The windows were shattered, and the door was locked from the inside, like the house had decided to swallow them whole. No one's ever been able to get past that door since. The town says it's cursed, but maybe it's just a house that's still waiting for someone to listen to its story. And that's why I keep coming back, not to solve it, but to hear it. Sometimes, the truth isn't in the facts, it's in the silence that follows. You've heard the tales, but the locals still whisper of a secret room behind the east wall, where the real horror began. Some say it was a nursery, others a laboratory. What if the ghosts aren't just the victims, but the experimenters? The town's oldest records suggest the Thompsons were a family of inventors, not just builders. They tried to harness the power of the earth itself, and the ground, it seems, wasn't so eager to be tamed. Some say the house was cursed by the land itself, a punishment for meddling with forces beyond their understanding. Others say the Thompsons were just trying to build something greater, and the house was their unintended masterpiece. There are those who believe the house is still alive, its walls pulsing with the memory of every soul that ever lived within. If you listen closely, you might hear the hum of its heartbeat just before the silence returns. And then there are the ones who say the Thompsons never left, that they're still here, in the walls, in the dust, in the air you can't quite breathe, that the house is not just haunted, it's waiting. And to this day, the Thompson house remains a mystery, locked behind a gate that's never open. Some say the key was lost in a storm, others claim it was taken by the spirits themselves. Have you ever wondered what happens to a house that refuses to be forgotten? The town's oldest records say the house was abandoned in 1945, but no one can confirm if it was truly empty or if the family simply vanished. Some say they were taken, others believe they never left at all. What do you think happens when a house decides it doesn't want to let go? The last official visit was in 2010, when a group of paranormal investigators claimed they heard voices in the attic. They left with recordings, but no one has ever shared them. You ever wonder what they found up there, or if they ever made it back down? Today, the Thompson House is a symbol of the town's past, a place where the line between history and legend blurs. Some say the air still hums with the memory of those who lived there, and some say the house is waiting for someone to finally listen. So, what do you think? Is the house still there, or has it simply moved on? And if it's still here, what does it want? I'll leave you with this. Sometimes, the greatest mysteries are the ones that refuse to be solved. You've heard the whispers of the Thompson House, but have you ever wondered what it's like to live in a place where the past won't let go? Sometimes, the silence is the loudest scream. The house isn't just haunted, it's holding on to something. Maybe it's the echoes of a life that never ended, or the weight of a secret that's never been told. And yet, for all the stories, there's still more to uncover. Maybe the next tale will begin where this one left off, or maybe it'll start with a whisper in the dark. Quick word from our sponsor. If this sounds like something you'd enjoy, take a look at the Stanley Quencher 40 Oz tumbler. There's a link and a QR code on screen right now, and in the description below. Alright, back to it. But for now, let's leave the Thompson House behind and see where the next story takes us. After all, the past is never far away, and neither is the next haunting. You ever hear of the Mignon asterisk? It wasn't just any ship, it was a French luxury liner, sleek and silver as moonlight, sailing the Atlantic in 1935. Some say it vanished without a sound, like it was never there at all. The Mignon asterisk was known for its elegance, its lavish suites, and the whispers of something darker beneath its polished veneer. Sailors claimed it had a way of pulling people under, like the sea itself was hungry. Theories swirl like the sea itself. Was it a tragedy, a mystery, or something far more unnatural? Whatever it was, it left behind a tale that haunts the Atlantic to this day. And now, we sail toward the truth. But first, let's take a moment to remember that not all stories are meant to be solved, and some are best left to the sea. You know, the Mignon asterisk wasn't just a ship, it was a love letter to the sea, crafted by a man who believed in the magic of the deep. Captain Elias Grady, a man with a heart of gold and a pocket full of secrets, set sail from New York in 1923 with a cargo of dreams and a crew of souls. The Mignon asterisk was more than a vessel, it was a home to those who boarded her. Some were looking for adventure, others for escape, but none of them knew the storm that awaited them in the Atlantic, or the tragedy that would follow. The crew believed in the Mignon asterisk, but not everyone believed in the captain. There were whispers of strange lights in the night, of a ghostly figure on the bow, of a voice calling them from the depths. And then, on the morning of the 12th, the ship simply vanished. No bodies were found, no wreckage, just silence where there should have been thunder. The Mignon asterisk became a legend, a tale told around fireplaces, a mystery wrapped in fog. And to this day, some say the sea still remembers her. You remember how the sea was calm that morning, the kind of stillness that makes you forget it's there. But the Mignon asterisk was already different, like she'd been holding her breath. The captain said the wind had shifted overnight, but the crew didn't seem to believe him. They kept glancing at the water, like they could see something beneath the surface that we couldn't. The radio crackled with static, and then nothing. No distress call, no warning, just silence, like the ship had been plucked from the sea and carried off by something that didn't want to be found. The last thing anyone saw was the Mignon asterisk vanishing into the fog, as if the sea had swallowed her whole. And then nothing. Not a sound, not a splash, not a whisper. They said the sea had a memory, and that memory was written in the silence of that morning. But some things, even the sea, forget to tell. You remember how the Mignon asterisk set sail like a dream, but something in the water didn't want to let go. The last radio call was so quiet, like a sigh before the storm. Then came the silence. Not the kind of silence you choose, but the kind that wraps around you like a shroud. No distress calls, no lights, just the sound of waves and nothing. They said the Mignon asterisk was cursed, but I think it was the sea itself that took them. Some say the water remembers, and the Mignon asterisk was just the first to forget how to sail. To this day, the Mignon asterisk still drifts in the bay, a phantom of the past. Some say you can hear her whistle in the wind or feel her pull on the tides, but no one dares to go near her. And if you listen closely, you might just hear the echo of a voice calling your name from the Mignon asterisk. I've spoken to several survivors, and their accounts are as disjointed as the ship's final moments. One woman remembers the fog so thick, she swore she saw her own reflection in the waves, only to realize it was the sky. Another man insists the ship wasn't just lost, it was taken. He claims the crew heard a voice calling them by name, not from the radio, but from the sea itself. Even the town's oldest residents remember the asterisk mignon asterisk not as a ship, but as a ghost. Some say it still circles the bay, waiting for the right moment to return. And then there are the children. Some say they've seen the asterisk mignon asterisk in their dreams, a ship made of smoke, waiting for them to board and never return. These stories don't prove the asterisk mignon asterisk is real, but they do prove something else. Some things are never truly lost. They just wait, like a song, for the right voice to sing them again. The investigators came with their notebooks and lanterns, but what they found was more than they could write down. The ship's log was missing pages, and the crew's final entries were filled with odd, almost poetic warnings. They found a strange symbol carved into the bulkhead, not by hand, but by something that left no fingerprints. It looked like a cross between a star and a serpent, and it pulsed faintly under the light. The crew had all vanished in the span of a week, leaving behind only their belongings and a series of strange, almost coded messages scrawled in the galley. They never said a word about what happened. The ship's captain was found in his quarters, sitting cross-legged on the floor, his eyes wide and unblinking. He hadn't moved in weeks, and the room smelled of salt and something else, something sweet and wrong. In the end, the investigation left more questions than answers, and the ship's story became a legend. But some say the Mignon still sails, just beyond the veil of the sea, waiting for the next curious soul to follow. You know, the one thing that's always bugged me is the lack of a single, clear explanation for what happened to the SS asterisk Mignon asterisk, and that's saying something. There's no definitive evidence, no body, no log entries, no clear cause of the disappearance. Just silence. And that silence is louder than any scream. Sometimes, I wonder if the asterisk Mignon asterisk was never really lost at all. Maybe it's still out there, waiting for someone to find it and the truth to finally come out. But the real mystery isn't the ship, it's the silence that followed. And that silence is still out there, somewhere in the deep. You've heard the stories, but some folks still swear the asterisk Mignon asterisk has a secret. They say the ship's not just missing, it's been hiding in plain sight, waiting for the right person to find it. There are whispers that the ship was never sunk, but refloated and hidden in a secret cove, where the sea's memory keeps it safe from time and tide. Others think the asterisk Mignon asterisk was never a ship at all but a myth, a tale made real by those who believed in it so fiercely they couldn't let it vanish. And then there are those who say the asterisk Mignon asterisk is still out there, waiting for the next curious soul to follow its trail into the unknown and into the deep. You know, some mysteries don't end with a body or a confession, they just fade. Like the SS asterisk Mignon asterisk, a ship that vanished, and no one ever found out why. The Coast Guard searched for weeks, but the ocean swallowed everything. No wreckage, no distress calls, just silence. And that silence, it's louder than any scream. Some say the crew was cursed, others say they were taken by the sea itself. But the truth, it's still out there, hidden in the cold, dark places where no one dares to look. And now, every year on the anniversary, people still gather near the shore hoping for a sign. But the sea gives no answers, only echoes. So, if you're out there, listening, what do you think happened to the asterisk Mignon asterisk? And what do you think the sea remembers? You know, sometimes the quietest places hold the loudest echoes. The SS asterisk Mignon asterisk may have vanished, but its story lingers, like the faintest whisper on a still night. And as you sit here, wrapped in a cozy blanket, I wonder what stories are still waiting to be told, just beyond the edge of your hearing. So, as we turn the page, let's not forget that even in the quietest moments, the past can still reach out and remind us that some stories never truly end. And with that, I'll leave you with a question: what will you hear tonight? If you listen closely enough, you've heard of haunted houses, but have you ever heard of a house that haunts you? Welcome to Castle Comet, a village in the heart of England where the past feels like it's whispering through the stones. Castle Comet is known for its charm, but there's something about this place that feels just a little too still. You can almost hear the silence waiting for something to break it. The locals say that the walls here don't just echo, they wail. A sound that comes from nowhere, yet fills the air with a deep, mournful cry, as if the stones themselves are remembering something they shouldn't. Quick word from our sponsor. If this sounds like something to enjoy, take a look at the Amazon Echo Duptith smart speaker. There's a link and a QR code on screen right now, and in the description below. Alright, back to it. Some say it's the wind, others say it's the spirit of a long-dead child who never left. But no one can explain why the sound seems to follow you, like it's calling you home. Before you go, if you enjoyed this, please give it a like, and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And tell us in the comments what you'd like us to make next. We read every single one. Thank you so much for watching. Comment this emoji if you made it to the end.